בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל. אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל. שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל. לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 995 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again as North Korea is escalating their support for Russia yet again. And also, Russia is suffering a massive economic crisis as their third largest property developer has collapsed again today within just a week of the biggest one collapsing. And it's really rolling downhill for them. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world as we are able to hear that the Russian Federation is collapsing from within at an alarmingly fast pace, as we were able to hear today that the third largest property manager and property developer inside the Russian Federation has collapsed today as the Russian depression continues to take another economic victim. At the exact same time, the Russian Federation's armed forces appear to be so deprived of munitions and basic equipment to be able to carry on the war that today pictures were made just south of Irkutsk showing that an entire Russian freight train filled with North Korean artillery pieces is now traveling through the Russian Federation, and we now believe that the North Koreans are not only going to be supplying raw bodies for the war in Ukraine for the Russian side, they're now going to be providing a lion's share of the military equipment that the Russians will be using from this point forward, along with other kinds of weaponry and systems that we've already seen in the past. Meanwhile, in the area of North Korea, we've already been able to hear that the North Koreans are beginning to ramp up their own war machine, as we have heard that Kim Jong-un today has made a national decree that they will begin to prioritize FPV, or as they call them, kamikaze drone development, largely trying to develop their version of the Lancet drone, not only to possibly use against South Korea here in the near future, but also to provide to the Russian Federation in support of their war effort. However, regardless of the North Korean and Russian efforts, nothing can truly beat the American military might and the industrial abilities of the United States of America, as we've been able to get majorly successful useful news today from the area of Pennsylvania, as we've been able to hear that the United States has ramped up its monthly shell production to 50,000 shells a day, which is the exact number that the Russian Federation is able to produce on a monthly basis at this point. And by the beginning of next year, we expect that the United States Armed Forces and the United States war industry combined will be producing a whopping 100,000 shells per month, completely obliterating the Russian full speed standard that we've seen of 50,000 a month, and once again showing that American industrial might and the will of the Republic will never be outdone by the Axis powers. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear inside the Russian Federation that some Russian soldiers appear to be on a little bit of an angry streak when they get home. They don't really seem to be peaceful people, and we've got a clip to show that today, but we also have a very interesting clip showing us that down in the Saratov area, the Russian Federation is no longer giving proper burials to Russian soldiers, especially if they are unnamed. They are starting to bury them inside of mass graves, possibly showing that the Russian Federation is trying to cut out the payments that the families receive upon the death of the soldiery, and not only that, even cutting down on funeral costs as well by burying them inside of these mass graves.
I guess the mass graves are a bit of an improvement over the mobile cremation trucks, I guess you could say, because that was very gruesome. But now they're just putting them in a mass grave. That's something else.
It is, and it really is something else. It's actually quite morbid when you look at it, and really something to show the Russian Federation cares dearly about those incredible soldiers that were fighting for the beauty of the Russian Federation and its great leader, Vladimir Putin. But nevertheless, down in the area of Krasnodar, we have also been able to hear that a major airbase has been hit just about 30 minutes before the stream began, and not only that, inside of Ukraine, major frontline action is continuing in pretty much all fronts, largely successful defensive actions or delaying actions by the Ukrainians as they continue to inflict considerable losses on the Russian forces, although it does appear that the Russians are making small gains around the area of Pokrovsk and Kurakovy at the moment. Meanwhile, down inside of the Middle East, we've been able to get a large amount, a really unprecedented level of documentation and footage from the Israeli Defense Forces today, as well as information about some of the specific whereabouts of Israeli soldiers, their ongoing battles, possibly their grander strategy within the area of southern Lebanon, and not only that, we've been able to see more extended Israeli Air Force campaigns in the area of northern Beirut as airstrikes have slammed into Dahia once again, trying to strike and destroy Hezbollah command posts within the abandoned ward of the city, and we've also been able to see some lightning strikes conducted in Baalbek, as the Israeli Air Force has also been trying to destroy this key corridor for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps at its weapons supplies to Hezbollah further south inside of Lebanon. We've also been able to see that there have been some missile interceptions conducted around the area of Haifa today, as well as medevac evacuations that have been conducted on the side of the Israelis to get wounded Israeli soldiers out of the fighting in the battlefields of southern Lebanon. We have a load of news to cover today. It's actually an insanely high amount, and these are just the major topics that we have to cover. There's an endless amount of topics that we really have in the news tonight. It's one of the larger news nights we've had, at least in the amount of bulletins that I have. There's about 30 or so of them, and we also have been able to hear that apparently the might of the United States and of this republic doesn't just extend abroad, but it also extends us home at home, because we were able to hear of a mighty clap. Some say it was even a slap that happened somewhere in Dallas just earlier today, and it appears that will be moving on in a very interesting direction. We were told that they didn't feel a thing, but the giant red welts on the face showed otherwise. Moving on from that, though, and into the actual major news that we have tonight, we are going to be moving on into Irkutsk first. We're going to be moving back to Moscow here in a second, because all of this is largely a part of the same news, but from what we are understanding and what our analysis has been showing us, the Russian Federation appears to be in a dire strait as far as their military and its ability to continue the fight is looking. Russian war industry is largely non-existent, and while the Russian Federation does have this massive stockpile of military equipment, most of it was made during the times of the Soviet Union, and the Russian Federation, over the course of the past 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, has largely lost the mass industrial abilities that allowed for them to have this massive stockpile of vehicles way back when the Russian Federation finally emerged from the Soviet Union. This means that all the vehicles that the Russian Federation has been losing so far are not returning, and the Russians are not able to replace the losses as quickly as they are taking them. And this is leading them to generally have a armor deficit, meaning that they're not having enough tanks and armor personnel carriers to fill in the slots of the tanks and armor personnel carriers that have been lost inside of Ukraine. This has generally been a theory a game theory of a sort, but it's starting to become a little bit more serious. And really quickly, we're not going to talk about the casualties of today right now, but to give you all an idea of the raw number of vehicles that have been lost, we have seen that 9,319 tanks as of today have been lost, along with around 19,000 armored personnel carriers. From what we understand, these numbers are so high that 100% of the operational Russian tanks and APCs at the beginning of the war have been destroyed at this point, along with the multiple thousands that have been pulled out of storage. And it is showing that the Russians are not going to be able to keep up with us for long, and we have been conducting a decent amount of analysis really over the course of this year, showing satellite pictures of Russian supply yards slowly being depleted of practically every single armored vehicle that is inside of them. And analysis on this channel has been indicating that eventually they're going to run into a rock and a hard place. They're going to have to continue fighting this war, but they're really not going to have any offensive means to be able to fight it with due to the lack of armored vehicles, and in some instances even due to just a lack of artillery pieces to conduct offensive efforts with. And from what we can tell, that is now clearly becoming the case. We did see in the past a possible instance of the Belarusians supplying some of their tanks and artillery pieces to the Russian Federation to help them out in the war effort, but today we have gotten news that is truly unbelievable. The Russians are now pulling on the North Koreans to supply them with heavy caliber self-propelled guns. We have never seen anything like this before in the entirety of the conflict, really, from the Russians being provided any kind of heavier weapon systems from any other country. Many people will say that the Chinese have been providing some support, and that is true, but that is in the form of Desert Cross really ATVs. It's nothing incredibly complex, and it's not necessarily a weapon of war, it's just some sort of a vehicle. Nevertheless, we were able to get a picture today from a rail yard somewhere around the area of Irkutsk showing us something that was truly shocking. Kuksan SPGs traveling along the Russian railways from North Korea and across the Russian Federation towards Ukraine. From what we understand with where this picture was taken and where this train is heading, it appears that the train is actually westbound, heading from North Korea and deeper into the Russian Federation. Something that is fairly interesting about the Kuksan SPG is that it's one of the larger and some would say more capable SPGs of the North Korean armed forces. It is based on the hull of a T-55, a T-55 main battle tank that would have been provided by the Soviet Union way back in the day. And the North Koreans modified the system to be able to carry a 170mm main gun that is used on the vehicle. It largely, in the best explanation, is an ancient version of a Mista S or an ancient version of the Bodana. Loads of these things have been seen around the world. This is actually not the first time that these things have been seen abroad, because interestingly enough, the Koksan SPG was also inside of the Gulf War, and we were able to see a very interesting instance of a Koksan SPG being destroyed a little while ago. Just to show you all this, just to make sure that we have this a little clear, this Kuksan SPG right here that was cooked to a nice good crisp was actually used by the Iraqi, I believe it was the Republican Guard, that ended up getting wiped out largely before they even came into contact with U.S. ground forces, and then the United States moved forward and pretty much wiped out the remaining lot that was resisting, and then the remainder of the Republican Guard largely surrendered to the U.S. forces or retreated from the field in a complete rout. Nevertheless, these SPGs have been around for some time, but it does seem that the Russians are getting so desperate for more equipment and more munitions really to be able to fight this war with that they're not able to produce in either means, that they're having to rely on the North Koreans to supply them with these SPGs. And these things...
Also, what was up with that picture of Kim Jong-un, like, looking at this thing? Like, go back to that other photo for just a moment. It looks like it was taken from, like, a whole different era. Like, the camera is, like, from, like, a whole different time period. Why is it all so grainy and foggy, like it was taken ages ago?
Man, they're about to start singing Are We Living Like in Those Days, man, and they are. Like, in North Korea, they are, man. Like, I'll have to play that song for y'all sometime, or put it in the... Oh, well, I wouldn't put it in the intro, but this is a North Korean song, and YouTube generally doesn't like songs from countries that the West isn't in good standing with. But still, it is a very interesting song, because the entire song is a North Korean song that pretty much is asking the question of modern people in North Korea, are we living like in the times of the people of old North Korea when it was first founded? And largely the answer is yes. I even believe in the song the answer was largely yes, which isn't a really optimistic thing. They made it sound like heroic and patriotic, like they're carrying on the tradition, but considering that everyone was starving then and everyone's starving now, I don't really think that's a tradition worth being proud of. But still, these SPGs are an act of desperation by the Russians. They're not modern at all. They're fairly antiquated, and that's why I said they're a very ancient version of the Bodana, because they do the same thing Bodana does. They're both self-propelled guns, but this thing is just woefully inadequate for the modern day. There is absolutely no computer systems assisting with aiming the gun. The shoot and scoot is going to be incredibly slow due to how this SPG is operated. It is a horrendous vehicle all around. There's really no way to get around that, and I would have to say it's clearly obvious that the Russian Federation is running out of SPGs. And this is something that we knew was coming around the corner because the Russians didn't have a large number of self-propelled guns, or at least heavy self-propelled guns, at the beginning of the war. They only had a few hundred Mista S's and a somewhat decent smattering of 2S1 Gadzivkas and 2S3 Akitsias at the start of the war, but we do understand that a lot of those have ended up being destroyed in the frontline fighting, and they're obviously not replacing these because Russian war industry is largely incapable of replacing these kinds of losses. And for this reason, they need to be able to find those heavy SPGs to fill that gap that they're currently having inside of the Russian armed forces. And the only way to do that is to reach out to North Korea. And this is starting to show us that there are a lot of critical areas where the Russian army does not have equipment. They do not have heavy SPGs like we're seeing right now because they're having to have them shipped in from North Korea. They do not have light machine guns because we're also seeing that the North Koreans are importing Type 73 light machine guns for the Russians to use. We're seeing that they're running out of practically everything. And in my honest opinion, I believe that the Russians are going to pretty much be propped up, crazily enough, this is legitimately insane to say, they're going to be propped up by the North Koreans for the remainder of the war materially, because the Russians have almost nothing left to fight the war with. And that may also be why the Russians are going all in at this point and trying to make sure to gain all of the frontline victories that they can at the moment, or at least gain as much ground as possible, because from this point forward, they're not going to have enough vehicles to even consider an offensive. They're going to be entirely on the defensive from that point forward, and there's going to be no chance of being able to try and claim more ground from the Ukrainians. And I would largely say that this is giving us a good idea that if the United States, which we don't really know if that will happen for sure, but if the United States is to start pushing Ukraine and Russia to a negotiating table, the Ukrainians may actually be in an incredibly good position, now seeing very clear evidence and signs that the Russians are not able to continue this war much longer, conventionally, that is. But still, moving on from this little picture right here, which is a very important picture in an aspect, we are able to see that the Russians are collapsing in not just the military, but they're also collapsing in the economy as well, as we were able to hear a bombshell statement that came out today from inside of the Russian Federation. Today's collapse was one of a shocking one. It is apparently the collapse of the third largest property developer in Russia. And this is following last week's collapse of the largest property developer in Russia. So out of the top 3 property developers in the entirety of Russia, 2 of them have completely collapsed at this point and have filed for bankruptcy and are currently being liquidated at this moment due to them just completely failing. And what this is showing, and also this graph is a very interesting one right here, what this is showing is that the amount of unsold apartment spaces inside of the Russian Federation is skyrocketing over time. Now, this is an interesting thing because there's a very easy answer that we have for why these apartments really aren't being purchased in any amount, and there's also a decent amount of Russians that appear to not be without a home. They simply cannot afford it. From what we understand, inflation is going pretty badly at this point inside the Russian Federation, and not only that, not a lot of Russians are getting paid. A lot of major companies have been collapsing, including Gazprom's oil company, which collapsed a little while ago. And we're also understanding that a great deal of other companies that are still operating are making such little profits that sometimes they're not even capable of paying their actual working employees, meaning that a lot of people in Russia don't have the kind of expendable income to be able to purchase necessities like shelter, like an apartment. And for this reason, we're seeing that these major developers, these property developers, are imploding inwards. And it's giving us a very clear picture that economically, time is starting to run short. Real estate is one of the most important determinators in the modern economies of the world on how well an economy is able to succeed. And if the real estate, I guess you could say, sector starts to collapse inwards, it is showing that things have gotten so bad that people are not able to at least provide themselves with one of the most important necessities there is, which is shelter, meaning that economic activity is pretty much grinding to a complete halt. And for this reason, the Russian economy will most likely also be following suit very soon, which it kind of already has been for a while, but it certainly will start to accelerate as we see these major development firms collapse and Russian apartments continue to be unsold due to people not being able to afford them. It is showing across the
Also notice like the similarities between Russia and China. China's been suffering a very, very big property problems and real estate problems in their country for quite some time. And remember, Evergrande did just collapse a short while back, and China is having that problem, and now all of a sudden Russia's having that problem. But like many people in the chat are pointing out, one of the main reasons why the houses are not selling and the apartments are not selling inside of Russia is because the interest rates are simply so high. I think it's like 25 or 26% on a mortgage right now in Russia, which is absolutely insane because that would be insane even by US standards. But remember, Russians earn way, way less than Americans, and that is almost impossible for them to manage to get a mortgage at 25 or 26%. So that's why you're suddenly seeing no houses in Russia selling, and that's why these property developers are going down the tubes because the ruble is devaluing and the interest rates are running through the roof because of inflation inside of Russia.
And really quickly to show you all this, the average Russian GDP per capita is only a mere 13.8 thousand US dollars a year. To give you all an idea of how bad that is, West Virginia is considered the poorest state inside the United States, and the average GDP per capita inside of West Virginia currently is somewhere around 57,000 US dollars annually, meaning that your average West Virginian is about 5 times wealthier on a yearly average compared to the direct monetary income they're receiving compared to your average Russian, which is pretty crazy when you put that into perspective, that the poorest state in America is still 5 times wealthier than any average Russian literally anywhere inside the Russian Federation. But the real estate economy has a massive impact on the ability of a country's economy to grow, and not only that, for their country to succeed. You can clearly see that right here. China's economy, to get you all the Chinese GDP figure here, has been skyrocketing. People have called it the mighty East Asian dragon, with how quickly this thing was rising up to really rival the United States. And for several years there, it was actually closing the gap incredibly rapidly. People actually believed that just within a matter of years, the Chinese would actually overtake the U.S. economy, and the United States would be playing second fiddle economically to the People's Republic of China. And crazily enough, due to the massive real estate collapses that have happened inside of China, along with a great deal of other factors like skyrocketing unemployment, which we've heard the last time that the People's Republic of China reported the unemployment numbers, at least among the younger population, which was around, I believe, 21 to 35, the number was reaching around 30% when they last reported it around a year ago. And we don't really know if that number has subsided since then or if it's getting even worse or remaining stagnant. But nevertheless, their economy exploded to a whopping 17.8 trillion in 2021, and the last number that was tabulated in 2023 was 17.79, literally almost identical to the economic activity and GDP of the People's Republic of China back 2 years ago in 2021. That's how big of a role the real estate sector can play in the economy, and it can truly stagnate a country or it can destroy it economically and send it into a depression. What China's in at the moment technically really could be considered a depression at this point, considering that they're actually having a negative GDP growth annually. You can see it went from 17.88 to 17.79. So they're actually starting to recede in economic ability, which is technically a depression, especially considering that's lasted for several straight years at this point. This isn't a recession. This is 100% a depression at this point inside of China. But still, the Russians seem to be suffering a very similar fate. It looks like, honestly, it's starting to go faster in Russia than it ever has in China. And also considering that they finally tabulated the 2022 and 2023 numbers, let's see if they have the chart for the Russian GDP. And it looks like they said that the Russian economy lost around $300 billion of total economic value in 1 year since the start of the war in Ukraine. We don't have the number for 2024 yet, considering that we're still in this year. We probably will get that number towards the halfway point of next year, but I would assume that the Russian economy has probably started reaching the 1.5 to 1.6 trillion mark, which means that their economy is rapidly shrinking in size, and it truly is at this point going into a severe depression with rising inflation, rising interest rates, among many other things, it looks like the Russians are truly, like our title says, are collapsing from within, militarily and economically, which are the death throes of a dying nation. On the other hand, what's really interesting is that the Indians are actually skyrocketing in economic growth at the moment, which is crazy. The Indian economy, which usually has almost been par on par with the Russians, is now twice the size of the Russian Federation's economy, which is pretty shocking. Russia actually has a smaller economy than Canada's as well, just to give you all an idea of how economically powerful the Russian Federation really is. And so a fairly interesting thing to look at there when we start to compare the economic averages and numbers. But one thing that's also even more interesting, and I have to throw this out there, is that your average GDP per capita income of a Ukrainian is actually only $5.2 thousand annually, which isn't really much. Like, you know, you don't really think about that until you see that, and then it makes you wonder. I just got to throw this out there. It really makes one wonder, like myself, are people who go to Ukraine going to Ukraine for the goodness of their hearts, or are they going there because everything's going to be insanely cheap because no one would be able to afford anything in Ukraine unless it was insanely cheap? Thoughts for you in the shower. Think really hard on that one, because I'm sure that there's probably a answer out there for that. But nevertheless, moving on from that, and also when I say people going to Ukraine, I'm not talking about everyone, but I am talking about some people who like to virtue signal and go over there and act like they're saving the planet by drinking in a bar. Maybe there's another sort of ulterior motive to that in the form of a cheap vacation in a war zone. Maybe. But moving on from that and out of the major economic collapse that we've been able to see today, it does look like the North Koreans are having to take an extra step forward to bolster the Russians. Not only are they bolstering them with raw meat for the meat cannon, well, not really the meat cannon, but meat canyon more so. Just kidding. They're actually supplying raw meat for pretty much the for the meat grinder is the best way to say it. They're providing artillery, they're providing shells, they're providing missiles. The North Koreans at this point are pretty much providing everything that the Russians need. But there's one critical aspect that the North Koreans have not been fulfilling yet, and that is the drone industry. The North Koreans have not developed or built a single drone for the Russian Federation over the entirety of the war. And it is very interesting to see that that is the case. But North Korea is working on changing that very soon, as we were able to see that the North Koreans are now trying to provide a form of a Lancet FPV drone to the Russians. And we were able to see some pictures of this coming out today. And Matthew, how are you hearing me? Are you hearing me well? Over? Holy moly!
There's some severe lag going on right now, and it's not on my end because I'm getting 1,000 upload and download, and everything's running smoothly, so it's not me.
We were coming through perfectly clear on my end, which is interesting to say the least. There's absolutely no lag there at all. But moving on from that, we can see the pictures of the fire and the flames of a car that has been blown up by the North Koreans. That car will never be replaced in North Korea, to be entirely honest. And moving on into the next picture, we were able to see some sort of a launch platform that they made for these drones. And they also censored the drone, which was fairly odd. We also got to see them launching the drones here. We also get to see the Fat Man is observing this directly, which is interesting to note. And then finally, in the last picture, they showed an up-close picture of these things, and it doesn't really seem like censoring them really is helping them out at all, because these are clearly Lancet ripoffs. They literally look just like a Lancet drone, and it seems to me, well, let me see here, Lancet drone. And it seems to me that it's not even a mystery. Look at the shape of these drones, their front wing section, and how there's 4 wings, and their rear vertical stabilizers, which are also 4 wings as well. It literally is a North Korean version of the Lancet. And there's a Lancet right there for direct reference. So going off of that, it does seem to me that the North Koreans are now beginning to produce their own drones in-house, and they are trying to ship these into the Russian Federation and also possibly consider using these against South Korea in the future, considering that tensions on the Korean Peninsula right now are incredibly high, and while they're usually high as a standard, they are wildly high at the moment. We're not really sure if both sides are starting to back off. They haven't really done any aggressive actions toward each other for a while, but it certainly is something that is being asked as a question. Are the North Koreans starting to produce these drones for themselves, or are they starting to produce these for the Russian Federation? And this is a question that has captured the imagination of a great deal of people tonight, many people who are watching this show right now. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this? Are they thinking that the North Koreans are making these drones for themselves to use against the South Koreans in the future, or are they using these, well, producing them specifically for export? What are people thinking on that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
So it looks like 68% of the audience said North Korea will supply Russia with drones, and that's why they're suddenly ordering a mass production of these attack drones, while 24% said North Korea is preparing for a Korean war, and that's why they're getting ready for themselves for their own interests, and 3% said it seems like routine activities. And I would say it's not routine whatsoever, because North Korea, first of all, does not have a lot of resources. So when they order the mass production of attack drones, that means it is an utmost priority for some reason. And honestly, I'm with the 68%. I think North Korea is trying to supply Russia with drones. This is more of the expansion of their partnership with Russia. They're sending manpower over, and they're also going to probably end up sending these attack drones over as well to support the Russian war effort against Ukraine. And Russia, in return, is for some reason giving the Lancet drones to North Korea. So apparently it's a bit of a tit for tat kind of thing, but I think North Korea would probably just settle on some beans or some food or something because they're starving, of course. But I'm with the 68%. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that, in my opinion, I'm also going to be with the 68%. They are largely producing these things for export. I do believe that the North Koreans are probably starting to try and develop their tactics and strategies to be able to maybe combat the South Koreans in the future, but for the moment, they're most likely producing these for export. The Russians and the North Koreans are getting it really heavily involved with each other, and the North Koreans, honestly, at the moment, are actually getting a lot more from the Russians than they are from the Chinese. And to explain why, the Chinese really have not been apt to provide the North Koreans with a large amount of food aid for free. Historically, everyone provided things for free to North Korea as a form of aid, and that generally came out of the Cold War and the battle to try and prove that communism or capitalism was a better form of an economic structure. Really, a decentralized economy like a capitalist economic system is, or a centrally planned economy like a communist economic system is. And for this reason, the Chinese and the Soviets had an invested interest in trying to make sure that North Korea was successful, at least historically, and so they would provide a great deal of aid of literally every variety and every type, not just food, to be able to try and make the North Koreans look like they are a wildly successful economy thanks to the virtues of communism and largely socialism as well. For this reason, the North Koreans were high on the hog just about until the late 1970s and the 80s because everyone was giving them everything. And also there was a little bit of an internal struggle that was happening amongst the communist countries as well, because it is no hidden secret that the communist Chinese and the Russian Federation were not necessarily big, well, actually, the Soviet Union weren't really big fans of each other. They were actually hostile to each other, and that's actually what led to Nixon going to China to explain that whole mini side quest in history, is because the Chinese actually considered America to be a better option than the Soviet Union. But beyond that, though, the Chinese and the Soviet Union, while both being communist, both kind of wanted to say that North Korea was a successful communist country, not just because they were communist, but because they were aligned to either the Soviet Union or China, and that's why they were kind of almost in a bidding war with each other to provide more aid to the North Koreans. After the Soviet Union collapsed, the Communist Chinese really have not seen a reason to support the North Koreans with free aid full on indefinitely like they were in the past, and so they've largely pulled that back a great deal and really don't trade with the North Koreans unless if the North Koreans have something that China wants. And there's not really a lot that China wants from North Korea. Really, the only thing they have to offer is coal. So the North Koreans will trade coal with the Chinese for the small amount of food that gets in return. So it's not really a great relationship that North Korea's had with China, and that's why they've been struggling even after the Long March of Suffering, or actually I think it was called the Great March of Suffering, or something like that. Oh, well, no, it was actually just the March of Suffering. That's what they called it in North Korea, which is the Great Famine. They still really haven't recovered, and food security is very fragile, to say the least, inside of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. For this reason, they've been trying to find ways to make themselves more food secure. Kim Jong-un is actually the first leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to not focus on heavy industry as the main, I guess you could say, facet of the North Korean government, but he's actually been trying to focus on consumer goods and also the expansion of the agricultural industry inside of North Korea, although that meets very little success because most of North Korea's land is not arable. It's not suitable for farming in any way. But with the Russian Federation, though, there is a lifeline that the North Koreans have never had access to before since after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that is unlimited food. The Russian Federation may be doing bad economically, but one thing that they're certainly not doing bad at is producing an insanely high yield of food every single year. The Russians have a great deal of agricultural land in their south, and it is pretty much on par with the agricultural land found in Ukraine, at least in the numbers of, arable acres or square miles that there are, and not only that, the amount of crops that are produced. There is so much food produced in Russia on an annual basis that they easily can export this food elsewhere, which means that the Russians really aren't running a net negative if they provide food to the North Koreans in exchange for valuable war materials. And the North Koreans really don't need the war materials because they do know that if anything went bad, they would probably conduct preemptive nuclear strikes with their nuclear arsenal. And so for this reason, they're perfectly fine with trading military equipment in exchange for food. It is a perfect win-win for both sides, at least in this arrangement, and that is why the North Koreans are now getting into drone production as well, because if they can cash in the short term on any kind of enterprise that will allow them more access to food, they are going to be going for it. Food is literally the most important thing in North Korea. Forget computer technologies, forget heavy industrial abilities, like some people would consider to be an important thing here in the Western world. For the North Koreans, they actually have a decent amount of military technology, and they have a decent amount of industrial ability because of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un, but they don't have food. And so if they are able to stabilize the food situation for the foreseeable future, North Korea will actually be in a far more stable position, and therefore their government will actually be a lot more stable as well. We generally actually believe that this would lead the North Koreans to start de-escalating in most situations, unless if something else happens behind the scenes that we really don't know about, like the Russians are prodding them to escalate. That may lead them to escalate, but at the moment, this is largely the sort of equation that we think the North Koreans and the Russians are weighing in. And for that reason, I would have to largely agree with the 70% of y'all that said that the North Koreans are going to be exporting these to the Russians, because it really is exactly what they're wanting to do. They want more food, and this is another way to cash a check for some more food from the Russians. And so with that, I hope that covers that whole topic the best we can, or at least my analysis on why the North Koreans would be exporting those drones. But moving on from that little talk right there about the drones, we were able to hear that Kim Jong-un is announcing the mass production of these FPV drones. And once again, it's largely leaning into these are probably specifically made for export, and that's why they're very similar to Lancets, and so that way they're not unfamiliar or foreign in their operations to the Russian operators that will be receiving them in the future. Meanwhile, though, in China, we have been able to see one of the funniest things. Matthew, do you know what I'm talking about?
What is it?
You remember, Matthew, that I think it was actually the Langfang air show that has happened recently just outside of Beijing. What's up, Beijing? Where we saw the Su-57, that was like made out of poorly welded parts.
Yeah, I think so.
So, as you may know, that air show is still going on. Did you know that, Matthew?
No.
Did you know that Shoigu showed up to the air show today?
No, man, tell me about it.
Man, I'm about to tell you about it. Actually, you know what? Better yet, Matthew, I'm going to let you hear the Chinese guy in the video tell you about it, because he said something that just resonated, Matthew. It reminded me of something that happened almost 2 years ago, but here's the clip. Shoyu's going to be in it, and you're going to hear something that's legendary. So here we go. Ah!
Oh,
He
man.
did it! Shoigu at the non dude, he freaking did it! And Shoigu
This one
actually...
guy in the front, he knew what it was about. This guy that turned around with the glasses, he's like, no way you just said that. Like, no way.
Dude, he looked like everyone when Mike Tyson slapped Jake Paul. Like, he was absolutely shocked that that was said. I cannot believe it, though, but listen to this. And look, he looked over, so he heard it. He heard it, dude. He heard the whole freaking thing. I cannot believe that they did that, man. Huge shout out, huge kudos to this Chinese guy who did this, because that is one of the funniest things that I could have ever imagined to happen in that scenario, and the guy just straight out did it. Absolute mad lad, 100% there. And I think that we need to see more of this kind of stuff. Also, another interesting thing about this is that Shoigu really doesn't hold an official government position anymore that's of any importance, and so I don't really know what the Russians are doing with him. He hasn't been purged, interestingly enough, so I'm guessing that he isn't an enemy of the state or really an enemy of Putin at this point. He's just fallen out of favor with Putin, and that's why he was removed from the position of Minister of Defense. But he's still pretty much free to roam around wherever he wants, even outside of the Russian Federation and inside of foreign countries. Also, Spanky the Fourth asked for context. Oh, buddy. I got to give you the context of this one. This is a bit of lore here. It's going to take me a second to explain this, but strap in, because it is the story of legend right here. I'm not even kidding. This is truly like the most legendary story of the war so far. So back when the war in Ukraine started, the Russian Federation was already taking really high losses relative to the time, and they were wanting to find a way to relegate the official losses that the Russian army was taking. And so for this reason, they reached out to their unofficial right arm of the government, which was the Wagner PMC, which is a private military company that was operated by a guy named Yevgeny Prigozhin, who was the owner of a catering company in Russia called Concord, and Concord Catering was a company responsible for feeding the entire Russian army. And so it was a very lucrative kind of a contract that Yevgeny Prigozhin was in charge of, and through the money that was pretty much through nepotism pretty much by Putin that he was receiving, he was able to field and fund an entire private military company pretty much on the money that was being made off of selling MREs to the Russian army. And so this guy had operated this massive enterprise in Wagner, Prigozhin did, inside of the Middle East. He owned oil wells inside of Syria. He owned rare materials and mineral mines inside of Africa. The Wagner pretty much controlled an area of Western Central Africa that some people would call the Neo-French colonial empire, and it was pretty much uncontested for a while. They did go up against the U.S. Armed Forces in 2019 in Syria and ended up getting obliterated by the U.S. That wasn't shocking at all. But beyond that, this was the way that the Russians could get at least some areas of the front line held down without having to expend their own army's manpower. And so Putin requested, of course, paying the Wagner PMC for their time and services to enter the Ukraine war and fight on their behalf. And this is where the legend begins. They immediately put the Wagner PMC into the deadliest area of the battlefield, right into the Battle of Bakhmut. And at the time, this was the deadliest battle that had ever been faced in the war in Ukraine. It's actually been outdone in the Battle of Avdiivka, and also in, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, let me see here. I think really the Battle of Avdiivka is really the only battle that's outdone Bakhmut in the amount of casualties. But the Wagner PMC was literally put in the dead center, in the vanguard, the front line fighting forces, to push the Ukrainians back and take the city, block by block, house by house. At any and all costs, they were to take this city. And as the battle started to pass by, from the first day to the first week to the first month to the first 2 months to a half of a year, the Wagner was taking insanely high losses. They were taking around 10,000 lost per month, and by the end of the battle, Yevgeny Prigozhin actually stated that the Wagner had taken around 30,000 dead and tens of thousands of more wounded that had been pretty much filtered in and out of the Wagner pretty much instantly. This led Yevgeny Prigozhin to be incredibly resentful of the Russian government and of Putin, because he actually saw what was happening to the Russian citizens that were out there on the battlefield. And while Wagner wasn't a kind or upstanding unit, they committed multiple atrocities against their own people and the Ukrainians. Yevgeny Prigozhin was becoming very embittered about what was going on with the Russian Federation and with Putin. And so finally, these tensions started to boil over, and every once in a while there was a little statement that Wagner had gotten into a fistfight with surrounding Russian units that were in their area around Bakhmut, and then later on those devolved into small shooting battles with each other where a Russian or a Wagner PMC would get killed. Finally, one day, for some odd reason, Shoigu actually ordered for Russian MLRS units to fire on a Wagner camp that was about 10 miles behind the lines near Bakhmut. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Yevgeny Prigozhin immediately ordered the complete withdrawal of all Wagner PMC forces from the Bakhmut front lines and also inside of Russia from their camps, and ordered them to immediately start seizing Russian territory and to start driving on main government offices in Moscow and St. Petersburg. This started the 36-hour coup, as we call it here on this channel, as it started and ended really in 36 hours. Prigozhin was pretty much meeting no resistance at all. He captured the city of Rostov-on-Don. He captured everything in between there to Kamensk-Shetinsky. He was driving up the highway. No Russian National Guard unit dared fire upon this convoy and would actually sit there and just stand by the highway and watch them drive by as they started making it further and further up the M4 and directly to Moscow. The central government was in a panic. It was actually rumored at the time, and we did see this on a flight radar, that Putin had actually gotten on a plane and started to fly out of Moscow, fleeing the country, but then they landed somewhere around Ufa, turned the plane around, and then flew it back to Moscow, and then we saw that Putin's convoy raced back to the Kremlin. In the entire event of Putin doing that, the city was setting up sandbags. They had excavators out on the main highways, literally digging them up so that way people couldn't enter or exit the city. They were waiting for it to go down. And as soon as Yevgeny Prigozhin made it to the city, around here at the Oka River, he was right at the city of Supakov, right there. He made it to the bridge, and for some reason, the coup ended. We don't know what happened. No one knows. It's a complete mystery what happened right there. But the coup stopped dead in its tracks right there, and Prigozhin gave up. Over the next month and a half, Prigozhin had a very uneasy relationship with Putin, but he was traveling around inside of Russia, and it looked like bygones were bygones. And one day, Yevgeny Prigozhin boarded a private plane in an international airport in the south of Moscow. That plane took off and flew over Moscow, and just a little north of Tver, near to the town of Torzhok, a Russian air defense system engaged the private jet he was on and shot it down, killing everyone on board, including his right-hand man, and putting Wagner into the pages of history forever as a dead PMC, and the only time that a private military company had tried to overthrow the Russian government in the entirety of their history. That is the story behind that statement, because that was the statement that started off the coup for the large part was Shoigu! That was the phrase. And so to give you that entire story right there, that was the reason why that little statement right there was so funny and so well deserved. That's the whole reason why everyone on the channel who's been around for 3 years is going, oh, because you know the legend of the Wagner PMC, you know why that statement holds weight. But still,
Nutsack lived a crazy life. Yeah, he started out as a caterer, then he became a private military man, and then he became a dead man after Putin came after him. And all he got out of the whole thing was a bronze statue of himself, Nutsack, in the flesh, right there in front of some. I think it's a museum of like something having to do with the Wagner. I think.
yeah, I think it was, yeah, or it was, let me think. No, it's near a cemetery, actually, I think. I think it's the cemetery he got buried in. I think that's where the statue... Huh?
The Wagner Cemetery, maybe?
I think so, yeah. I think that's where the statue is. And there's been a couple of other unofficial statues that have been set up, but he did end up getting those torn. Well, those ended up being torn down by the Russian central government. So I think there's only one that's still standing, and that's the one near to the Wagner Cemetery, if I'm remembering that correctly. But I'm not entirely sure. But still, it was one hell of a story. I wish that, considering that I'm telling you the story right now, I wish that you had been around back in the day when we were covering that, because it was a saga to remember. I mean, like, when you really think about the war, and when I tell it as a story, this war is a war of raw legend, to be entirely honest. The kind of stuff that's happened in it, the crazy betrayals, the insane battles that have gone on, it's a story for the ages, to be sure, and probably one that'll be told for decades to come. But still, that is the story of why Shoigu after the Prabasna meant a lot when that guy said it in China to Shoigu, because that's the statement that Prigozhin made, and also one of the people that Prigozhin said he was going to overthrow when he made it to Moscow was Shoigu. So Shoigu knows exactly what that statement meant as well when he heard it being yelled at him by the Chinese guy in that crowd. So with that, we're now going to move on from this interesting little story time right there. We've actually never had a story time like that here on the channel for a hot minute on what's been going on in the Ukraine war. And I'm going to be honest, I actually enjoyed telling the story because I got to add a little bit of dramatic flair to it, considering that we get to tell it where it's not happening live, where we have to kind of cover it as it is. We actually get to talk about it as it really happened and unfolded. And so it's a little bit more interesting and dramatic sounding that way. But moving on out of China and the little bit of news that we got there, it's now time for us to move all the way back into the Russian Federation inside of Europe, where we were able to see that near Kazan today, we got to see the normal behaviors of a Russian soldier at home. Matthew, cue the documentary.
Here we can see the Russian soldier attempting to get some sort of merchandise. The local attendants at the store appear to be scared by the man as he begins to fling bottles and drunkenly walks to the door. The Russian then turns around, feeling challenged by the women, and decides to throw a bottle at one of the attendants. The tensions are running incredibly high, and this Russian will not find a mate. We can now see him throwing a larger pink bottle, as the pink bottle weighs much grander in the Russian cultural sphere.
Oh, he's coming back again.
We can now see him throwing chocolate bars at the Russian attendant. As he begins to yell, he now goes for the door for the 9th time. He now returns and begins to kick the counter. As the video buffers,
I guess he wanted that 100% off coupon, but he didn't quite have it.
he did not have the 100% off coupon. But nevertheless, it does appear that the store is going to be having 100% off of its inventory, as most of it has now been destroyed in the chaos.
And it's weird. The store clerks are kind of like, I can't tell if they're like laughing or they're just like, this must happen quite a bit because they're not acting too fazed by it. Like they're a little flustered, but not like freaked out terribly.
It doesn't appear that they are freaked out terribly. It seems as though this is a normal daily occurrence. And we could see one of them locking the door to make sure that he does not return, and then surveying the damage. And that is the end of the clip.
But still, that is your average Russian soldier at home, and he seems to be a generally unhappy kind of a person. But moving on from that, and down into the area of Saratov, we also got to see something that's a little bit more grave. Maybe the reason why this Russian soldier isn't that happy. Probably because he knows that his country has practically abandoned him. Matthew, that almost sounded like the Hanoi Hilton thing. Americans, your country has abandoned you. Like, to joke about it a little bit, but the Russians have largely abandoned the citizenry and the government because we are able to see a very morbid clip right here. What you're seeing are rows and rows of ditches, trenches that have been dug by this excavator. The reason for these trenches is a little bit more sinister than one would believe. You would be probably thinking, oh, they're about to do some training. No, these are actually the guys who apparently failed training on the battlefield and have ended up dying in the Ukraine war. These guys, from what we understand, are unidentified because their remains were so far mangled that there was really no way to identify who they were, or any identification that were on their bodies was also destroyed as well. The Russian government is not giving these soldiers a proper burial in an unmarked grave plot. They've actually decided, it appears, to cut down on costs and also cut out on possibly paying family members of the deceased, if they are able to identify them, their proper compensation, that they're going to start burying them in mass graves instead. According to the person who published this video, there is going to be about 6,000 Russian dead that are buried inside of these mass graves inside of the Russian Federation. Completely unknown and forgotten, but to themselves.
And also, by the way, I saw some people asking in the live chat. They said, are they digging new trenches to put the dead in specifically, or are they literally throwing them in the old trenches where they fought and then burying them there? I'm pretty sure these are all new. Like, I don't think they're burying them in the active trenches. That would be a little bit problematic for the other soldiers. But I think they're just digging a whole bunch of new trenches to throw all the deceased soldiers into.
Yes, this is pretty far into Russia. It's not near an active combat zone. So for that reason, it's not a ditch that's being used in fighting because it's hundreds of miles away. It's somewhere in the Saratov region. But moving on from that and out of the area of Saratov, we were also able to see that the Russian government, as our last internal Russian topic is going, has put out a statement today about those virulent Ukrainian looters. I mean, I'd be damned. The Ukrainians be stealing everything. You can't have shit in Koronevo. But nevertheless, here is the statement that was made by one of the Kursk government officials today on the looting done by these horrendous Ukrainians. On the subject of looting, also discussed yesterday at a federal meeting with new business people, because the show, unfortunately, there are facts of looting among both civilians and military personnel. Applause. Yeah!
Nothing like clapping for that.
Dude, let's loot more! Yeah! Dude, imagine if the President of the United States came out and said, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to say this, but after Hurricane such and such, there was a large amount of looting that occurred. And then the entire crowd went, yeah! It's like, dude.
Yeah, we're happy for looting. Still more.
Dude, oh man, it's your... The country is only like that on one day in America, and that's Black Friday. But beyond that, though, it's like, I don't get this. Like, why are they clapping and applauding over people looting? Like, but anyways, moving on from that, we are going to be reading the rest of the translation of the statement that was made today. The task is set by the federal government business now, military police among others, provide enhanced security. Provide increased security and control at the border. The crowd's actually getting pissed at this. They're like, what do you mean we can't loot anymore, asshole? Like, they're like, we want to loot. There is also evidence that the loot is sent to delivery services. That's why the goal has already been set to stop the intake. In this way,
Allegedly.
yeah, allegedly. Therefore, a number of measures have been taken, and we hope that they will be effective. Now, this is something that's interesting, folks. The Russian government has come out today and said there are large instances of people and the military looting. And everyone went, yay! And then they said, we're going to stop this. And everyone went, boo! It's like, what the hell's wrong with them? Like, you would think that they would like to hear that the Russian government is ensuring that there's some level of order. You know, at least they're saying that they're going to try and crack down on it somewhat, or at least making the statement. But then the Russian citizenry don't even like to hear that. Like, it's
Nah, man. If you were making $13,000 a year and also your mortgage rates were sitting at 26%, you'd be mad that the looting wasn't allowed either. Because I think at this point, the only way a lot of Russians can live is looting. At this point, is their economy is in such foul shape.
Man, you know, and honestly though, the reason why they're booing is probably because that government official up there, Matthew, he's like, I've heard of a lot of looting, and we're going to stop the looting. And then when they capture it, like, when they stop a truck, and they're like, whoa, we have to check it, and they open it up, and there's, like, rare stuff in there that's valuable. They'll be like, ho, what do we have here? This is confiscated by the federal government. And then they go and sell it themselves, and then just loot it off of the looters. It's like, that's probably why they're pissed, because they know that it's most likely what's going to happen. But that is ridiculous. I've never seen that before anywhere in the Western world, but that's what you get in Russia. And, like, it's the craziest thing. We're not even exaggerating that. The Russians legitimately, as civilians, support looting. Like, that's insane. Like, I've never seen it like that anywhere. But moving on from that and into the active front line in Kursk, we were also able to see the clearing of Russian positions today by the International Legion. And this is Recon Team Kilo, or Recon Team Kilo. But nevertheless, when you see Recon Team Kilo getting ready to lay down some kilos on the Russians.
Aw, man, this is my type of recon team, Kilo.
Aw, man. Oh, my goodness, they're laying down the kilos. Aww.
I thought they were a recon team, man. These guys are engaged in, like, infantry. Jeez.
Dude, they do recon through live fire. Like, they're like, how many of them are there?
They're bringing back examples. They said, okay, we want proof. They could just go drag one back. Okay, see here, they were out there. They're right here.
Dude, they're the recon team that goes out there, finds out that there's 30 of them, and wipes out 30 of them. And then they're like, so what did y'all run into? About an entire platoon? All right, do you need further reinforcements in that area? Do you think it's that bad? No, we took care of them. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's a pretty decent recon team. I don't think that's a recon team. I think that this is an actual, like, infantry company or an infantry squad or something like that. This is not just a recon team that's supposed to like screen the enemy and figure out their strength. They're engaging them and not in like a distant firefight just to assess their numbers. They're up close and personal right now. They're greasing them.
I'm just saying, I think they misunderstood the assignment of recon, because these guys are laying down more fire than like the infantry at this point.
Now the real question is, if they're recon, they will start to retreat. They will fall back because their only job is to engage them and then assess their strength and then report that back. Now, if they're an assault team that's disguised as a recon group, they're going to start pushing forward. And so that's the big question right here. We see them
Apparently
still.
they're well armed with ammo, apparently, because they're just like unleashing a full auto with no discretion whatsoever.
Yeah.
First and the second position. We need Ukrainian now.
Wait a minute, hold up. We took the first and second positions. Yeah, this ain't no recon team, is it then? Like, they're literally assaulting the enemy positions. This isn't recon. This is the actual attacking force.
Oh, I gotta speak in English.
And we see artillery coming down in the distance.
We maintain the pressure. We fix the
We maintain the pressure as we fix the position. So, hold up. This recon team, I see some people saying that this is like force recon or something along those lines. Generally, though, doctrinally, at least from what I've read of Russian and Chinese doctrine, and Chinese doctrine is very analogous to American doctrine, recon teams are never supposed to engage and destroy the enemy. Like, they're not supposed to fix them in combat and then destroy them with overwhelming firepower by pretty much encircling them and destroying them in detail. That's nothing that recon is supposed to do. According to Chinese doctrine, which is fairly similar to American doctrine, and Russian doctrine is somewhat similar to Chinese doctrine, recon teams are only supposed to engage the enemy long enough to assess their force and then retreat if need be. The only time that a recon team is ever supposed to actually engage and attempt to destroy a enemy force is when they're providing a pretty much a force as a cover, which means that they're trying to protect a main force further behind them. That's really the only time that recon ever pretty much holds its ground, and even then it doesn't conduct an offensive. It is kind of conducting a pretty sturdy defensive and trying to remain fixed in place for the large part, just holding the enemy where they are.
Man, one day when these guys are recounting the story right here to their grandchildren, they'll be like, yeah, we were sent out to go and recon the enemy and see where they were. So anyways, I started blasting.
Man. Dude, they are laying it down. Now it looks like they're finally...
Oh, they're actually leaving now.
Yeah, they're finally falling back. After taking like 3 positions, it's like, I don't know if that's like, you know, technically being recon still or what, because they literally wiped out 3 different trench lines and then fell back. It's like, is that really a recon, or is that like assault infantry that's kind of operating like recon? I'm not really sure. They still did a freaking good job, so I guess it doesn't really matter if we ask a lot of questions on that. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we did get to see that a Ukrainian striker got hit by a Lancet today, survived, and just kept rolling. And it's actually this striker up there. It got hit, pretty freaking huge hit. It looked like the striker was destroyed in the hit, but believe it or not, as though it's a miracle, the striker just keeps going. Unfazed. Like, no joke, it's unfazed. They just keep driving. And that's the end of that clip. Never seen that before, but American vehicles truly are proving to be some of the most resilient out there. The Bradley, now the Stryker, these things almost look like they could take much greater hits than they were originally intended to take. But moving on from that and into Bolshoi Soldatskoy, we also got to see a Russian tank that was destroyed in this area as well. It appears to be some form of a T-80 of some kind that the Russians were fielding in the area. It has been knocked out. You can tell it's a T-80 because of the wheel arrangement on the side, which is that of a T-80. The T-72 has a more symmetrical wheel layout. The T-80 has it almost grouped, the wheelbase is grouped in twos, which you can see down there. You can also see that the rear engine bay is that of a T-80, as well as the turret being more so perfectly circular. It's a very weird thing to explain because the T-72's turret is almost perfectly circular as well, but there's a slight difference that I cannot describe for some reason, but nevertheless, the frontal glacis is also that of a T-80. It really looks like a T-80 BVM, to be entirely honest. That was knocked down in the area, which does show that the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, which is the one that lost this tank, most likely, considering that it was near Bolshoi-Saladskoye, is apparently pulling out its fine china in terms of the armor that they have. But moving on out of that area, it is now time for us to get on into the juice. The raw Jews, the Ukraine frontline fighting Jews. And then we'll also get down to the Middle East as well, because we still have a good bit to go. But before we get into that, we want to make sure to address a couple of questions, because I understand that we got some straight juice in the question segment tonight. Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some straight juice, but first of all, we need to address a poll that's currently running, and the question is, it says Russia's third largest property developer collapsed just 1 week after another collapse of the largest property developer inside of Russia. And what are your thoughts? 51% said Russia is going to collapse, meaning their economy, while 33% said it's simply going to be hard times in Russia, and 10% said Russia is probably going to survive 100%. And on this one, I think it's probably a little bit too far to say that Russia is going to collapse with certainty. They're certainly not going well in their economy, like it's certainly not going well whatsoever. But I'm actually with the 33% that said it's probably going to be hard times. And this is nothing new for Russia. It's been hard times in Russia ever since the war started. And honestly, not as bad, but it was bad times before that as well. But it's really gotten bad since the war started because everybody cut Russia off. They got sanctioned to hell and back. And also, of course, they're seeing collapses of several major companies inside of Russia due to those sanctions. So, and also not to mention, Ukraine's been slamming the oil refineries quite a bit, and the petroleum industry is taking a big hit as well. So it's going to be very hard times for Russia coming up very soon, and they could collapse, but once again, it's a little bit too early to say that, but that would be the best case scenario for Ukraine if the Russian economy were to completely collapse, because of course, that would completely obliterate the Russian war effort. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Russian Federation's economy is on the brink. That doesn't mean that it's going to collapse 100% within a short period of time, but it has been on the brink for a bit. It's pretty much on the ledge every day. And the Russians are trying to stop it from completely falling off the ledge to its death, but it looks like that's going to be pretty much unavoidable in the long term. I would say at this point, an economic collapse is a certainty, either during the war or after the war. Even if the war ends, they will not be able to recover the terrible economic situation they're in, so it will have to go into a collapse and then be rebuilt from the ground up. However that ends up looking, which I would assume it's not going to look that good because the Russian Federation is horrendous looking compared to their abilities during the times of the Soviet Union. And you know, that's really crazy when you think about it because the Soviet Union wasn't really that advanced as it was. It was fairly behind the times in most metrics that could be measured. But then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, everyone in the Soviet Union and the former Soviet Union, the former Soviet republics, all of them started to do worse. Like, what? That's actually a crazy thing that's true. And a lot of people hear this and they believe that this may be propaganda, but it actually is true. Most people who lived during the Soviet Union, who actually grew up and lived in the Soviet Union, actually believe that it was better in Soviet times, and technically it was. Economically, it was actually a lot better than the times that were seen in former Soviet republics, except for the Baltics. They're the exception, because they joined NATO and also got into the EU pretty quickly. But during the 90s and the 2000s, most former Soviet republics were in horrendously bad shape, far worse than they were even in the death knell of the Soviet Union. And so for this reason, a lot of people who used to live in the Soviet Union look at it fondly. But still, that should just give you all an idea of how far the Russians have fallen off since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And if they collapse again, we assume that they're going to be even worse off than what they are now, a shadow of their former selves, which is already a shadow of their former selves. So it's going to look pretty horrendous at that point. It will probably take them a long time to recover, or they might not ever be able to recover, and they're largely just a minor or an insignificant economic power with a large arsenal of nuclear weapons that they will not be able to maintain because they don't have enough money to maintain them. That's also
And also, real quick, Enforcer, I just saw a bot come into the live chat, and they said Russia's actually doing better than the USA when it comes to economy. That's actually completely false. And I think pretty much everybody can call BS on that one, even without knowing the numbers. Currently, the U.S. inflation rate is 2.6%, and that's considered a very high very high inflation rates for the United States. And Russia is experiencing about an 8.54% inflation rate. Once again, I don't know why I keep saying interest, but it's almost 8%, almost going on 9% inflation inside of Russia. I don't know why I keep getting caught up on the interest and inflation thing, but Russia is doing much worse in terms of inflation than the USA is doing. And also, the US does not have almost 30% mortgage rates either. Like, we do not have that at all. Russia is doing horribly compared to the United States. Like, not even on the same level. It's like comparing apples and oranges when we talk about the two different economies here. Russia is by far way, 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 way lower. But, Enforcer, what did you find?
Also, I found the GDP stats, which we showed earlier in the stream. I want to do simple math, and I feel like many viewers will like to see the simple math because everyone knows we're great at math. But beyond that, to look at the GDP figures, now let's go with the idea Russia is doing better than America. Okay, let's keep that in mind. That is a fact. Russia is doing better than America. So apparently, $2 trillion of GDP is better than $27 trillion of GDP, apparently. Now, I'm not good at math. I do believe that the Russians are actually beating the United States GDP-wise by at least $1. But I would still assume that the Russians must be far better off. And in fact, it's not a race to see who has the most money. It's actually a race to see who has the least money. And I believe, Matthew, I have a contender. One second. Let me go see if I can find this. Holy moly! I found it. Rwanda. At 14.1 billion. Damn it, it didn't show up. Hang on. At 14.1 billion. Now, that is a country that is really succeeding in the world. They're actually doing better than the Russians because, once again, everyone, we're not counting GDP off of how much money you have. We're counting GDP off of how little money you have. That's the real way to count success. And remember, folks, the grind set is always the mindset. So it's not about having the money. It's about getting the book that tells you how to get $1 million. Now, if we're asked a question, folks, would you rather have $1 million or would you rather get a book that tells you to get $1 million? And the answer should always be that you get a book to tell you how to make $1 million instead of for some reason just getting the million and then learning how to make $1 million later so that way you can have 2 million. This is the real grind set here, folks. So Rwanda's really getting it because they have no money at all. But if they get a good book, they might be able to learn how to make money. And that's the real grind set, folks. Don't sit there and kid yourself thinking that $27 trillion of GDP is what you really want. You actually want $14 billion of national GDP, which is equivalent to about, let's see, like a fraction of an Elon. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Because
you know what's the most important metric, though? Like for Russia, like
What
to
is the
gauge
most
how their economy is doing, the most important metric is the potato. What are the potato prices doing? Because, of course, they make the vodka with the potatoes, and, of course, they eat the potatoes. And I was told, I just saw here on my sources, that the potatoes have increased by 70% in cost ever since the war started. And apparently it's still going up. So the potato, which is a pretty common vegetable there, it is going up like crazy. So they're not going to be able to make their vodka like they used to.
And let's see here. In which country is the potato the most expensive? Huh. So apparently it's in France. Well, let's see. What is the price of 1 kilogram of potatoes in America? We don't measure in kilograms here. We measure in pounds. So that is like completely foreign to me. Like, I don't know what a kilogram really is. Like, I know what a kilogram is, but I don't know what that is relative in weight. I know what a pound is, though. But still, it looks as though everyone is saying that the potato price is skyrocketing. So I would have to say, how can Russia do so good at potatoes so much? Checkmate, Russians. But anyways, moving on from that and out of this very deep economic talk, folks, remember, the grind set is always the mindset. The Russians are better off than us because they have simply less money. But moving on from that and out of that little analysis that was masterfully done, Matthew, give yourself a pat on the back. We're going to slap a sticker on this channel saying the most trusted name in news, and we're going to go with that for the rest of our lives. But with that, I do understand, Matthew, that we really do have some absolute banger questions coming out of the live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first super chat of the night is going to go to a channel legend. It is LSA Rocks, who throws in the biggest super chat of the night, and it's a $200 donation. Thank you very much, LSA Rocks, for that massive support, and it's that type of support that keeps this channel running, and we seriously do appreciate it. He said, LSA, and take one from a live chatter.
And I gotta say, whew, thank you so much for the massive support, LSA Rocks. And you rock, LSA Rocks. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And we will make sure to take one question from one live chatter. But before I do, LSA Rocks, I want you to know what your support helps to make possible. It helps us to make amazing things possible. incredible things, long-lasting things. And I would like to tell you a little bit of what I've been up to today. Matthew has known about it because he actually got to hear one of the tracks. He got to hear one of those sick beats. And I actually was up at a very early hour this morning, considering that I usually stay up till about 1 at a minimum, or till 3. I had to get up at, I think it was like 6:30 this morning, which doesn't really sound that late. You know, a lot of people, I used to get up at 5:30, and so I know it's not that late. But when you get to bed at like 3, it's only like 3 hours of sleep. Well, I got to bed at 2 last night, so it was only about 4 hours of sleep. But I got up, I sat down, and I got on a Zoom call. And in that Zoom call was a composer and an entire orchestra of about 60 people or so. And for an entire hour this morning, I was in that call with the composer, and the orchestra were getting a tune knocked out for this channel that has been in the works for about 3.5 months at this point. It has taken a lot of time, it has taken a load of effort, but we are just mere steps away from being able to have the Armed Forces medley that y'all hear in the stream intro every single night, which is a rough mock-up of the intro done by Digital Instruments. It's about to be actually done by the live orchestra. It's all done. I actually have the raw audio tracks, which is so cool. Like, I actually got to sit in and listen to them do it, and it was incredibly cool. And so we're sending it off to a sound mixer at the moment, which is already lined up and everything, and they're going to be knocking out the sound mixing, and then we're going to finally have the final track, which is incredibly impressive. It was composed by a composer in Argentina and actually orchestrated by an orchestra in Hungary, Budapest scoring, which has done amazing stuff in the past for massive movies that some of y'all would know, like the movie Die Hard. And also, my specific composer actually works for Disney Pixar and does a whole bunch of interesting stuff for him. And I've given a pre-screening of this to everyone, Matthew included, pretty much all my family, and also some close friends that I have that are in the armed forces, and everyone says that it is absolutely incredible sounding. And not only that, it sounds kind of Disney, which wasn't really what we were shooting for, but I honestly have to say I love it. I think it's actually a great fit. It sounds even more American that way, and I was absolutely blown over the top. I have to give a huge shout out to the composer who's been working on this project. His name is Marcos. Y'all will probably be hearing a little bit more about him on Patreon, because we're going to be doing a special Patreon release kind of like the behind the scenes stuff, or a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff that I filmed of it that was going on, and also some other stuff. But we are so excited to get that out. And folks like you, LSA Rocks, who have been supporting this channel for a long time, helping us to be able to pay the bills and also save up some money in the background, have helped to make a video, a major, well, not a video, but a music project like this possible. It's taken a lot of time, a lot of effort, and no joke, a lot of money to get this thing done. It's costed, just to be transparent with you all, it's costed about $4,000 to $4,500 to get to this point. And the the sound mixer is going to add a little bit more to the overall cost. But as far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no expense that should be spared when trying to make the best streams possible that we can for y'all. And so if that means that we have to go through and pretty much spend a fortune trying to get the intro specifically made for the LSA, specifically made for y'all, we are going to do that. We are trying to figure out what to do in the future, because this is the first of many projects that's going to be going on, trying to get specialized music for the LSA, so that way we can make things a little bit better. And to just give y'all a little bit of a note of what is to do in the future for the behind the scenes, to kind of like musical roadmap of the channel, we are going to be working simultaneously on the anthem of the Lee Spring Army, actually being composed by the composer and also orchestrated by a live orchestra. It's going to move from being a choral to an instrumental only, but it's going to be incredibly cool, and it's also going to make the anthem of the LSA sound way better, because the orchestra today sounded insane. It was so freaking good. Y'all wouldn't believe it. And I can't wait to get it out to y'all. Hopefully it'll be ready by this week. Well, not this week, but by next week, so that we can finally be in the stream. And also, we're going to be working on our own special version of the Star Spangled Banner. Currently, we have a Star Spangled Banner in the intro, which YouTube seems to kind of like, kind of not really, if y'all get what I'm saying with that. So for that reason, we're trying to get an anthem made that sounds very similar to that one, but is our own version of the anthem, so that way we can use it without having to worry about anything down the line. We're really excited. Well, I'm really excited about this stuff. I know Matthew is as well, but this has been,
Oh, yes.
this has been like my little child of a project that I've been doing in the background for a while now, and it is just so freaking amazing. I love it personally. I think it's a wonderful thing. Like, we don't even have the completed track at this point. It has to go to the mixer to be able to have the track completely done, at least on this one part. But I cannot wait for y'all to hear it, because I think y'all are going to absolutely be blown away. Also, I don't know how we're going to do this, because we would like to see if we can somehow subsidize the cost of these projects, at least not the first one. The first one was just done by me because I wanted to do it, but we are going to try and see if we can find a way to subsidize the production of more tracks in the future, because if people really like them and we are able to pretty much sell them as albums, or at least digital copies, not really to like get it, because you could literally just, you know, like clip it straight out of the intro and get it for free, but it really would be to try and support future projects. We could make all kinds of different songs from the United States, from countries we support around the world, that would be unique and in their own special LSA format. I think that would be incredibly cool. To be entirely honest with y'all, I don't know if y'all are a big fan of that, but I'm always a huge fan of music. I love music, and I've always just wondered when in the world I would ever have our own specific special kind of music made for this channel, because eventually it was going to come down the line, and it finally has happened. And I was so blown away because it was with an orchestra, and I love orchestrated music. The composer I was actually working with while he was growing up, he was talking about how he was a big fan of the U.S. Armed Forces, even being from Argentina, a big fan of the U.S. Armed Forces, and he loved the U.S. Air Force song when he was growing up, and that this was an amazing project to work on, because he wanted to compose this stuff, but he had never gotten a project before in his whole career where anyone asked him to do the Armed Forces songs in a medley. So this was an amazing thing for him, an amazing thing for me. The orchestra had a lot of fun with it too. It was fun all around. And also, one other thing I gotta tell you this. I can't stop talking about it because I was so excited about this today, and I want to tell you all about this. And this is a good point, especially since LSA Rocks is throwing in massive support, which helps to make stuff like this possible. I also spent a little extra. I indulged and got a video editor and a video photographer. Video photographer, to be on the floor while the orchestra was playing and filming it. So when it's complete, the first time that this is ever played in the channel intro, it's going to have little clips of the orchestra actually playing it while it's playing, which is going to be incredibly cool. I hope that y'all like it a lot. If y'all do, we might find a way to further support projects like that in the future, either by creating some sort of like a quote-unquote war bond kind of a thing, where we could, you know, raise support to be able to make more music projects like that possible, or something along those lines, because I would love to be able to keep doing stuff like that and have really cool music that not only is the channels, but it's also the LSAs as a whole. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And, you know, Matthew, I'm really wanting to play a track for y'all, like all of y'all, but we will save that for later. If y'all really want to hear that, we'll save that for the last question segment, because we still have a lot of news to go. But a massive thanks once again for the support, LSA Rocks, and helping the channel to keep on running with massive support like that, because I can't say this enough. Y'all make this thing entirely possible. Y'all made it possible for us to do this the entire time for about 1,000 days now, paying the bills, and also being able, in the background, especially for me, to be able to save enough money to take on this venture on my own, so that way we can have amazing songs for the LSA. And I got to thank you so much for that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make any of this possible, especially what happened today. And so a massive thanks once again. Now let's get that live chat, Matthew.
All right, so the live chat question, sponsored by LSA Rocks, is going to go to Prater from the live chat. He said, something I just thought of. If the Russian economy collapses, will the likelihood of them deploying a tactical nuclear weapon, will that grow?
It would be highly unlikely, because their economy went into a complete collapse. There's probably going to be enough internal unrest that the Russian government's efforts and focus will completely disappear from the war and will be focused inwards. A lot like the Soviet Union with the war in Afghanistan. They started to wind that down and withdraw from Afghanistan once the internal situation in the Soviet Union was getting so bad. Pretty much all of their efforts were being focused on just life support at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well, because I think the chances of them having an economic collapse, at least historically compared to what we saw during the collapse of the Soviet Union, would actually decrease the chance of any sort of radical steps like some sort of a nuclear action. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and I can be wrong. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Old Warrior, who's a longtime channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that support. It's a $50 donation. And he said, I went through the Ukrainian claims of Russian casualties, and at total November, as of 11/14/24, 21,230. A Russian lost a record 41,000 in October, but are on pace to hit 45,000 in a day, shorter month.
Dang. That's actually pretty high when you think about it, Old Warrior. 40,000, 45,000 actually. That is at least, I would say 15, well, not 15. Actually, no, that would be about 15 brigades worth of just combat strength disappearing a month, which is crazy. Like, that's insane. That is like an untold number of battalion tactical groups that are just being eliminated in the casualties and deaths being faced by the Russians. And it really is showing how bad things are going for them, and really probably the 100% explanation as to why the North Koreans are sending so many forces into Russia and why they want them there, the Russians do at least, is because they're running out of men. They can't keep this going forever. The Ukrainians also were taking some decent losses from what you understand as well from Ukrainian public statements. That's never publicized, though, how much it is. But it does look to me to be the case that the Russians will not be able to sustain these losses for much longer. They can't get people into the military as quickly as they're losing them. So for that reason, I would have to say that those kinds of losses probably is another thing that's going to start culminating to the Russians having a very tough time keeping the war going at this pace, especially the pace they picked up since the beginning of this November. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you, Old Warrior, who have been old warriors and channel legends of the Lee Spring Army, who have been able to make this thing possible for such a long time, and allowed us to talk a little bit about, once again, the staggering casualties that the Russians are taking on a monthly basis in Ukraine at this point. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. But before we move on to the next one, I want to make sure to clear out some bots, because I am seeing a couple of bots in here that we have to get rid of. Someone trying to relate the war in Ukraine to what's going on with Israel and Palestine. If you are not pro-Israeli, you're not welcome here. It's a very simple kind of an equation there. But let's see here. And I'm just making sure to cover everything. Saw some people say that they do want to hear the track right now. They want to hear it now. And so I will, you know what, Matthew, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it just this one time, but it's not going to be a long one. I'm just going to play a really quick segment, and y'all can kind of get an idea. Let me see here. So it would be under Files, and then it would be under Downloads, and then we go here, and then we go here, and let me see here. I think one of the best ones that we have, y'all can see that there's literally a different track for every section of the orchestra, and that's why there has to be a sound mixer, because all of this has to be compiled together. But let me see here if I can scroll down to the violin section, because that's the part that wasn't that bad sounding and like a rough recording, but I will play only a small part of this so that way y'all can hear it. So this is, Matthew, can you see the media player pop up on screen?
No, I cannot see it on my end.
All right, so I'm just going to play this for y'all. This is going to be the only part. I'll play maybe the whole thing at the end, but here is just a little snippet of it, so that way if y'all want to hear the rest of it, wait until we get into the second question segment, and then we'll be able to get it for y'all. So here it is. Just in case you were wondering what it sounded like, that's the end of the Anchors Away, that part of the medley. That's the end of it right there, you all got to hear. But if y'all want to stick around, y'all will be able to hear the rest of it later on at the end of tonight's stream. But moving on from that, Matthew, I believe that we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our last one here is going to go to Hal Rose, who puts in a $33 donation, and thank you, Hal Rose, as well, for that very generous support. And Hal said, Enforcer Matt, I saw my first 60-second ad on YouTube today, and you were ahead of the curve, and love Ukraine, and pick a question, please.
And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And also, I hate to hear that you saw your first 60-second ad on YouTube. We try and cut down the ads off of everything as best as we can. The only thing we can't cut the... The only thing we really can't cut the ads off of are the videos, because YouTube doesn't promote our videos unless we have ads on them. And even recently, something that we've heard is that they're seems to be a little bit of a thing with YouTube not pushing Ukraine war content, or really world news content at this point anymore, because they're trying to focus more on domestic political things with the election, so they're deprioritizing us in the algorithms pretty much with everyone else at the moment, which is a little disheartening, but still we have to deal with it. But beyond that, I do hate to hear that you had to deal with that ad, and I hope that you don't deal with any of those here on this channel, because that has to be hell. Also, by the way, with the ads getting longer, that's also encouragement on YouTube's end to start pushing people towards getting YouTube Premium, which, you know, it's kind of like pick your poison there. You either get YouTube Premium and you're paying, I think it's like $12 a month to YouTube to get no ads, which if you watch YouTube a lot, I'll be honest, it's actually a pretty decent cost of convenience. It's $12 a month to never see an ad again. Matthew and me both have YouTube Premium. Not that I'm sponsored by YouTube or anything to promote Premium, but it does remove all the ads. Or you can not get YouTube Premium and then watch like a minute-long ad that's unskippable, which is honestly insane at this point. But anyways, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, let's see here. I saw, let's see, some people said, it sounds great. It sounds like John Philip Sousa. That's a pretty good one. Yeah, actually, the orchestrator is a big fan of Glenn Miller, but this had no Glenn Miller inspiration in it. It was more so a specific clip that I had from a World War II newsreel, and I was like, I want it to sound like this. And he made it almost sound just like that, and it has a bit of like a Disney feel to it. I think it's great. Like, I think it's wonderful. And let's see here. And someone said, more cowbell. Oh my God, get out of here. But let's see. Well, it seems like a lot of people really did enjoy. Also, Randingo, I did think that as well. More brass. The thing is that the specific microphone that was used for that part of the track was in the violin section. There is one where it is in the brass section, and then the brass is so loud you can't hear anything else. So that's why I was picking a string track, because you could hear everything somewhat well, instead of like in the other tracks where you literally just hear that one instrument, like the clarinets or the brass. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can. And with that, we are now going to be moving on out of this question segment. Huge thanks to you once again, though, for the support, Hal Rose, and helping this channel to keep on running. And we're now going to be moving on into the location unknowns. So we were able to see today some very interesting ones. We were able to see some training in the 78th Brigade. And these pictures are really quick, of course, just trench training as usual. Moving on into our next bit, we also got to see the 148th Brigade showing why you do not use motorbikes, boy.
Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Some motorbikes and some nice, clever music.
A
Jeez,
motorcar.
man, that motorbike was absolutely demolished. The whole skin burned off of it.
Oh, that carp. But still, they are just toasting these things.
Man, I hate to see that too. I like these motorbikes, but they gotta go.
Man.
Oh, that started a little forest fire with that one.
Man, Smokey the Bear is having a fit, a conniption fit on these, man. And there goes another one. And that's the end of the clip, but boy, howdy, what a toaster, what a toaster. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the airborne forces of Ukraine in training. These pictures went hard, so I wanted to share them with y'all. Especially this one. This literally looks like they're in the middle of a war zone, no joke. But moving on from that and into the next pictures, of course, just training as usual. Pretty cool pictures. Not really a lot to mention here, just training. And so with that, we're now moving on from that clip and on into our last one where we got to see the Russian casualty report. And what?
Man, 0 Bobcats. I'm telling you what, it was. I saw this earlier and I was like, oh dang, 0 Bobcats. Like it's okay though, because all the other losses are insane. The troop losses are staying super high, and also they're knocking out like 19 tanks today. That's crazy as well. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Man, it was an incredibly impressive day with 1,690 Russian soldiers wounded and killed, along with 51 APCs, 124 supply trucks, 19 main battle tanks, 64 artillery pieces, 54 drones, 3 MLRSs, 4 cruise missiles, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Today's troop losses were the 5th highest day, tied with October 26th of this year, and the supply truck losses were actually the 2nd highest daily losses in the war, according to Ms. Disa, keeper of the records. Moving on from that, though, and into the area of Vovchansk, we were able to see some limited action today as the operators of the drones of the 3rd Assault Brigade were hitting Russians in the trees. The trees, they ain't speaking Russian, that's for sure. They're kind of clearing that out. Using that Roundup.
Well, you want some of that glyphosate? It's good for your health.
I gotta tell you something. I was sitting there and I was watching this Russian, and he was hiding inside of his position, and it was hard.
But we see them slamming more FPV drones
All right.
down.
that was Mike Tyson. We haven't done Mike Tyson in a minute. But considering he's hopefully going to beat Jake Paul's dumbass tomorrow, I'm going to do Mike Tyson in celebration of it. Because I think he's going to put it down on him. He might be 58, but I got faith in Mike Tyson. If you don't like what I'm saying, turn off your station. But moving on from that and into the area of Kupiansk, we also get to see a Russian tank getting hit with a javelin. Check this clip out. And there goes the javelin. And it got him. Dead on the top of the turret. That thing is gone. And so with that, we're now moving on from that clip and on into the next one, further down the line in the Sibironsky Forest, where we got to see some of the fighting going on in this area, filmed by the Brazilian volunteers, as usual. They are pretty much the only people who get us clips out of the Coromantel Forest. A big shout out to the Brazilian volunteers. We see them moving on down the trench in rapid speed, actually. Speed walking, I'd say. We see them meeting up with another fella. Also, I see a lot of people, since I brought up a mention of it, I am going to get political on this one, folks. I hope Mike Tyson does win tomorrow. Just so that way we can see Jake Paul get out of boxing. That's my entire, that's my entire premise there.
He got pretty shaken by that little smack that didn't hurt his face, but his face turned beet red after he got smacked.
Dude, the guy
didn't hurt that bad.
The guy got slapped, said it didn't hurt. His face was literally forming blisters where the hand met his cheek. It's like, you can't say that with your face literally looking like it's forming welts. It's like, that just doesn't make any sense.
Nothing like fighting an old man for old time's sake. You're going to really win the respect with that one.
Yeah, and I mean, like, really, like, in my opinion, it's a lose-lose for Jake Paul. It's like, if you beat Mike Tyson up, you're an elder abuser, because he's 58 years old. I mean, like, there's no boxer out there at 58 that, you know, is fighting anymore, because, you know, their body's past their prime. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is. Or if he gets beat up, he got beat up by an old man. I mean, there's no way to win there. You know, like, that's just... It's not a good thing. Also, I've got Mac McGee said it's a staged event. I don't know. We'll see. Like, if it's a draw or something stupid, I will say that it probably might be. But as far as that fight goes, I don't see Jake Paul winning either way. If he literally wins or loses, he's losing either way. And the other thing is that it was so stupid, because we watched the weigh-in, Matthew and me did, because we are interested by this spectacle of ridiculousness. But beyond that, what I heard is that Jake Paul said, literally, Matthew, in that intro, remember that? He said, Mike Tyson, I'm sorry, but it's my time now. It's like, it hasn't been Mike Tyson's time for like 20 years. What the hell are you talking about? He hasn't even been the heavyweight champion for like 20 years. Like, it's been...
I could have sworn that Mike said he wasn't going to fight again, too, because he said he wanted to put all that behind him, but all of a sudden, like, he wants to fight again. So, I don't know. He's probably getting paid, like, what, $20 million or something for that fight, so that might be a good reason to come back out and fight again.
Yeah, you know, like, I would have to say, I think, in my personal opinion, it's a ridiculous fight. I back Mike Tyson 100%, by the way, because I'll just be honest, Jake Paul's annoying, and also this whole charade and show that he's putting on in the boxing field, like he's some kind of a pro boxer when he's fighting like people who used to be the champions, but they haven't been for decades, because, you know, they're old and time has moved on. I think that's a ridiculous kind of a premise. It's like the Ringling Brothers circus act of the boxing world right now, in my opinion. But moving on from that and into the area near Spernay, we also got to see the work of the SSO inside of Kirshchina. So here is the clip. Oh, and we're going to be muting that.
Oh, yo.
Dude, it's the Mongolian throat singing, man. I think it's like literally something like that. Let me know.
That's not like that haka that they do in the New Zealand Parliament to disrupt the thing.
Okay, okay, we're not gonna go there. Like I was about to start by reflex right there, but we're not gonna go there. But we can see that the Ukrainians are taking a little bit of their time around here, wandering around. They're actually behind the Russian lines, by the way. So this footage is probably a little old, and they just put it out recently, although this happened weeks ago, most likely. Wait, Jake Paul is in Puerto Rico? Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that. I thought he was still around like the California area. But anyways, moving on from that and further down towards Chasiv Yar, we were able to see some fire support missions also being conducted around Chasiv Yar as the Ukrainians still continue to hold the line against the Russian forces. Moving even further on down and into the area around Pokrovsk, we also got to see a Russian FPV fall into a Ukrainian trench, but it was so poorly made, it took so long for it to explode, the Ukrainians actually ran out of the trench to safety. So here's the clip. And the drone has hit the ground at this point, has not blown up. And we see the drone right around the corner. And they're now making a run for it. And it blew up right there, and they made it out just in time. Lucky for them. But that's the end of the clip, and once again showing the inferiority of Russian drones. But moving on down towards Krasnoyarivka, we also get to see a drone taken out as well. A Lancet, specifically. It might actually be a North Korean Lancet. You never know. It looks a lot like one. Oh, dang, dude, that thing's trying to hit some moves.
Look at that. Isn't that the drone they just gave over to the North Koreans?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a weird-looking drone.
Dang, and they got it. Man, impressive. I love to see it. We love to see it. But it's incredible. But moving on from that, we also get to see a Russian T-90M that was hit in the Kurakove area. And we could see the T-90M flipped over in a ditch, burning. And that's seeing the clip right there. But moving on from that and out of the area, we're now moving on into Zaporizhia, where we were also able to see a Russian storage site getting hit in this area. And it looks like it's the return of the Luftwaffe.
Oh, no. Oh, no. The color scheme and all.
Geschlechtvergleichungen in den deutschen Balken. But they are hitting that Russian ammunition cache fairly effectively.
I see Jose Diaz in the live chat said Jake Paul did move, apparently to Dorado, Puerto Rico, and he couldn't vote in the U.S. election, according to Jose. So that's interesting. I don't know why he chose to move down to Puerto Rico, but you know, I guess that's his call.
You know, man, I just gotta say, man, that whole thing he did out there on the stage, man, that was sad. I'm not gonna lie. So like, it was so theatrical and forced. And also, one thing is that when Tyson slapped him, he didn't even react. Like, he actually wandered off. Like, he went and, like, hid. Which, you know, shows that he might not be doing that well in the fight. Like, a lot of people are believing he will do well because he's fighting a guy that's way older than him, that's not in his prime. But considering how he didn't even really react at all to the slap, and he tried to pretend like he didn't even feel it or anything, although he certainly did because his face was turning, like, beet red on that side after he got slapped, he's not going to be doing well tomorrow, I would think. I would hope, at least. But moving on from that, we did also get to see this Russian turtle tank getting obliterated as well. Oh, and someone said he moved to Puerto Rico because of the taxes, which is interesting.
Ah, yeah, that makes more sense because I was about to say that guy's lived in like California, like I think in Los Angeles for a long time, or like places like that, like really big cities in America. So why would he want to move to Puerto Rico? That seems kind of like a weird bit of a change.
Yeah, I was like, that's weird. That's weird. But well, you also see that this turtle tank is blown up enough to blow away its casing, and it just keeps getting hit. It's the tank that just keeps giving, and it's giving fire and flame and fire and fury, the likes of which has never been seen before.
They call this a Tortuga.
Tortugas! And I gotta say, Tortugas pizza was pretty freaking good. But moving on from that, and out of the area of Zaporizhia, it's now time for us to move on down to Krasnodar, where we got to see an airbase getting hit. And look at this thing. We got loads of videos of it as well. The air defense lighting them up. The air raid sirens, the classic ones going off. I mean, it sounds like World War II out here. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the air defense once again at the airfield. Oh, we can hear the drone. Oh!
Damn.
And in the next clip, we can also see it again. Whoa! That's the end of that clip. Oh, boy, howdy. It was a unfortunate demise for that little airfield. We'll be getting a damage assessment most likely tomorrow. Now, finally, at an hour and 50 minutes into this news segment, it is now time for us to move on down into Israel, as there are major battles happening in Lebanon right now. From what we're understanding, the Israelis are near Chama, which controls a height that overlooks the entirety of the beaches south of Tyre, which will give them a dominating strategic position in this area to be able to control the battles that move from that point forward. Moving on from that, though, and into the area just a little bit further north, we were able to see Israeli firefights as they were moving through and clearing houses and taking names. We're going to be muting the clip because there's some audio.
We had a narrator that time. That's crazy. I've never heard a narrator over the war clips before.
Here we can see the Israelis laying down suppressive fire, a thing that is very familiar to the Israelis. Watch out, here comes a 2,000-pound J-dam straight through the roof.
It's just... You see them moving on forward, clearing out the room. There's a lot of stuff in this room. A lot of stuffs. Interesting stuffs. Long-lasting stuffs. Oh.
Oh my.
Hey, we got some luggage there.
Yeah.
It looks like a backpack. But we also did get to see the return of some wounded soldiers from the battlefield. The Israelis have been evacuating them by helicopter, and we can see one of those helicopters returning to Haifa. We can also see all the cargo ships awaiting entry to the port out there. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing a medevac of Israeli wounded from Lebanon. We also got to see the interception of incoming rockets over Haifa as well, pretty much around the same time. You see that air defense pod at work.
They released the birds too.
Oh, the birds! Like the worms.
The birds! Oh, the birds, the birds. I'm telling you, the birds. Oh. Good solid interceptions on a nice clear day like that.
Oh.
I gotta tell you that these birds are really distracting me. I want to shoot them and eat them
or something like that.
Come here, bird. Get in front of my car so I can ram you.
I was driving down the street and I ran over about 3,000 pigeons.
Or something like that. That's the end of the clip.
Put it in the trunk.
Dude, like, if he said that, man, like he ran over 3,000 pigeons, you would hear somewhere in the distance, "Oh no. What's wrong, Mike?"
I don't know. Something's happened. It's like thousands of pigeons screamed out at once in terror, and then their voices just vanished.
Or something like that. Like, oh no, not the pigeons. But moving on from that and out of Haifa and on out of the area of southern Lebanon and northern Israel, we're now going to be moving up into Beirut, where we were able to see that more airstrikes were occurring around the Beirut International Airport by the Israelis today. Oh!
Oh, crap.
Holy moly! But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also get to see some airstrikes at Baalbek, as it does appear, at least at the moment, that the Israelis are also extending their operations to try and knock out IRGC supply points. Moving on from that clip and into the next one, we can also see the debris and damage as well to the surrounding area. But moving on out of Lebanon, it is now time for us to move on and up into the area of Kyiv. It is now time for us to cover the day 995 speech of President Zelensky. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Peach!
Give me speech.
A long-lasting speech.
Здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Довгий день сьогодні був. Продовжуємо працювати для підготовки нашого внутрішнього плану стійкості, того, що потрібно, щоб Україна вистояла. Сьогодні опрацювали кілька пунктів, зокрема, культурний суверенітет, те, що стосується і культурної спадщини України, і сучасної культури, культурної дипломатії, виробництва українського контенту, і заради цього реальне дієве об'єднання культурної спільноти в Україні. Це частина нашої сили, це елемент гарантування зв'язків України з глобальним світом. Бувають речі, які не здатні донести іншим ані політики, ані громадські діячі, ані інформаційний простір. Але емоції роблять це, мистецтво це робить. Культура загалом це інструмент, який працює однаково заради людяності в різних частинах світу. Ми маємо приділити цьому значно більше державної уваги, і це буде. Також сьогодні опрацювали пункт внутрішнього плану щодо безпеки. Безпеки в усій нашій країні, в кожній області, в кожній громаді. Це основа, безпечний простір, який потрібен кожній нашій людині. Хороші напрацювання є у Міністерства внутрішніх справ, є у Служби безпеки України. Все обов'язково впровадимо. Вже опрацювали пункти, зокрема, щодо енергетики, детально все підготовлено і щодо нашої зброї, нашого виробництва, нашої співпраці з партнерами. Загалом 10 пунктів, які будуть представлені наступного тижня, і під кожен пункт разом з українським громадянським суспільством, разом усіма, хто готовий доповнювати раціональними ідеями з бізнесу, ми підготуємо фактично базовий доктринальний документ для України, для нашої стійкості, з чіткими додатками, покроково. Те, як ми спрямуємо наші внутрішні можливості заради української перемоги. Заради того, щоб ми мали право на це слово – перемога. Ми всі, кожен українець, кожна українка. Мільйони людей, які мріють про завершення цієї війни справедливо для України і працюють заради цього, воюють заради цього. Сьогодні була доповідь головкома Сирського, як і завжди, саме з цього починається день, не тільки Донеччина, ще й Куп'янський напрямок. Наші воїни там спрацювали дуже ефективно. Я вдячний усім за стійкість, південні напрямки, Курська операція. Пишаюсь усіма нашими людьми, кожним підрозділом, який тримає позиції і забезпечує Україні можливість переконувати світ, переконувати, що люди мають виграти. Саме те, заради чого б'ється Україна. Я дякую всім, хто нам допомагає. Дякую всім, хто з Україною. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 995 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. But before we get on into talking to each and every single one of y'all, which is fun, by the way, we do have to make sure to address a big question that has been asked to all of y'all about what's going on in the Middle East, because it is the middle of the East, and we got to know what's going on down there before we get in the middle of this, of the East, of course. But nevertheless, Israel continues to escalate attacks on Iranian proxies throughout Lebanon. And will Iran respond soon? And it seems as though a lot of people are believing, yes, Iran will respond. And others are believing that the Iranians are scared. Some people are thinking it's possible, but not really likely. But a lot of people are putting out different opinions on this. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this? And what are people saying about it? And what are you thinking about it as well? What is your take on this? What is your hot take?
All right, so the whopping 42% of the audience said yes, Iran will respond soon, while 25% said possibly, but likely not, and 24% said no, Iran is scared now. And I would say this, folks. I think Iran has had a change of heart. They've flipped the script, per se, and I think they've gotten a little bit scared to start launching the reckless attacks that they were launching just about a month ago. Actually, a few weeks ago, actually. I think they've gotten a little bit scared. Now, that does not mean the proxy forces are getting scared. Of course, they still are attacking, but I think Iran as a country is thinking it's about time to sort of de escalate things just a little bit, or otherwise, we could have some very bad consequences coming back on us very shortly. Because one thing that the upcoming administration is very certain about is Israel will be supported 100%. So even though they're not really sure about other things, they will support Israel. So I'm actually with the 42%, or excuse me, I'm actually with the 24%. I believe that Iran is scared now, and they're not going to attack Israel in a major response. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I'm not really sure if the Iranians are going to respond. They said that they were going to attack before the American election. That came and went, and now it's about, let's see here, about 10 days, almost 2 weeks after the American election ended, and we're still not seeing them do anything. So I would be honest with y'all, I don't really know if it's coming around or not. I'm sure that it will, but it'll be so far down the line, it'll almost look like it's its own isolated incident. But I'm not really sure. I'm honestly leaning towards they might back out of this one and chicken away, because they do know that the ebb and flow of the region is going to be changing. While we don't know about other areas for sure, although I will say from what we can tell, it does appear that Ukraine and Taiwan is going to be supported just based off of the picks for the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. We're not getting into those picks, though, for reasons, but beyond that, we are understanding that Western interests will be supported as a norm. It seems as though it's going to be supported militantly in the Middle East more so than any other area. So the Iranians may be trying to back off so that way they don't end up getting obliterated by the incoming U.S. leadership. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best I can, in my opinion. But before we move on from that, I know that a lot of people asked about this, and Matthew, I think we're going to give a little special treat, a little special one, Matthew. You know what I mean? Let me whip your Discord over here to the second screen, so that way I can set this up here in a second. But many people were asking, Enforcer, could you go and get us that beat, that sick trap beat? That beat that makes everything bullin'. And of course, we want to make sure to throw out the beat, like mustard on the beat. But beyond that, this ain't mustard on the beat. This is far better, and this is better than that song that KSI made. But beyond that, we do
This
have
is ketchup on the beat.
Man, this is for real mayo on the beat. You know what I mean? Like this is great. Like right here. Oh, by the way, I do want to say this. If I had to pick in between mayo and ketchup, I'd pick ketchup. Like mayo is okay on some things, but it's not as versatile as ketchup. That's an obvious truth. But beyond that, let me see here. I should be moving into the seg. Here we go. Here we go. So, to explain a little bit of what this is, these are the numbers it takes. I believe that there was around 23 takes that were made in about the course of an hour. There were only 2 full ones. The first one was very rough because the orchestra was trying to figure out what they were doing, and the second one was very good. Although, I will say this, we don't really know how good it is because there isn't a completed mix made yet. I want to put that out there. So when y'all hear this, don't say, oh, that doesn't have enough brass, or the violins sound too loud, because this isn't the final version. This is one of the raw pieces. I'll actually show that to y'all here in a second. It's one of the raw pieces that is going to make up the final product, but still, let me get this up here, and so we will get that loaded up. Okay, so with that, Matthew, you're going to be able to hear mustard on the beat. So let me really quickly get your Discord switched over to where you're listening to the media player and not the main screen. And when we're done, I'll switch you back. So that way Matthew can follow along. Here it is.
Yeah. Follow along. Man.
Your microphone would not pick you up, man, when you got high pitch. You were like, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, dang. I was like, his microphone's maxing out. But beyond that, I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, but here it is. This is the orchestration that was done today, the rough draft of the Armed Forces intro that's already in the intro, but this is the actual one that was done by an orchestra. So here you go. So of course we're hearing this from the violin section, and this one, this part of the section was closer to the low brass, which is the trombones, which is why you hear the trombones a great deal. But that was the Coast Guard segment. So the next segment is the U.S. Space Force, which is a pretty cool one because I actually have a decent amount of friends that are actually currently in the U.S. Space Force at the moment. So here is that track.
I love that viola.
Man, this is really good, man.
And that bassoon over there, I was going wild on that one bit.
That part where it went "Rrrr," like that part. Oh yeah, that was a trombone actually. But that's a pretty cool part because that's actually in about half of all of the U.S. Air Force March versions of Wild Blue Yonder. Is that "rrrr" thing because it's supposed to be a plane flying overhead. That's what it's supposed to kind of sound like. So that's what's being tried for with the trombone. Sounds kind of cool actually. Like when you think about it, other versions of the Wild Blue Yonder actually make the intro of the song sound kind of like a propeller plane starting up, you know, like they're trying to get the dynamo working to get the propeller spinning so that way you can get up to a high enough RPM that it actually, you know, turns over and starts. Sometimes they go for that. So this was kind of a mix of the two. Like there was that thing of like almost like a plane almost sounding like it flew over, but still the intro was more so leaning into the actual melody of the Wild Blue Yonder, which is a pretty cool one. But here's the Wild Blue Yonder in its entirety. Now, I'm not going to lie, the next one is actually really, really good. This was my favorite one, actually, out of all of them, because I generally went into this with an open mind. I was like, one of these is going to end up being the winner, in my opinion, of being the best sounding, and this one is actually the best. This is well, in my opinion, of course, and y'all can disagree. There's a lot of people say that the Air Force song is their favorite, and the Air Force song in this one was great. Like, I would say it was probably one of the best ones in it. But the Navy one was really good, and y'all might hear why. At least that, in my biased opinion, this one was the best. So here we go. That was probably the best one. Like, I like the...
Yeah, I like that one. It sounds like a lot of fanfare.
Oh, yeah, man. I love the string part of it. It was so good. It was so melodic. And then the last part, this part is my favorite because I'll tell y'all something. I hate this one part of Anchors Away. It's the part that goes dun 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 dun. I hate that part because usually it's done so like comically sounding. It almost sounds like a joke. But for some reason, this one did it so well. I know why the reason was. The composer did a great job composing this, but this part was just incredible. This went from being the most unliked part of any song in the armed forces that I ever have seen, in my opinion, to this is now like my favorite part of any song in the armed forces is this one part. Right up here. Like, the French horns were great in that part. So the next part is the Marine Corps hymn, which a lot of people are a big fan of. So here's that part. Sadly, I got to be honest with y'all, the Marine Corps hymn is probably the Army and the Marine Corps hymn are some of the worst sounding ones right now, and it's not because they are bad. They were done incredibly well because I got to hear the entire thing as the orchestra sounded while it was happening today, but considering that they're all separate tracks now, y'all are hearing this from a specific part of the orchestra, and this one is coming from one of the string sections near to the trombones. So you really can't hear a lot of what's going on in the background in the Marine Corps hymn in this recording, in this part of the track, but there was a lot going on that y'all cannot hear in that version. So it sounds really simple there, but once the mixer gets a hold of this and puts it all together, the Marine Corps hymn is probably going to be one of the more impressive ones in here. The Army's song is also going to be great too, but you really can't hear a lot of its moving parts either because the mixer hasn't gotten a hold of it and put everything together. So here is The Army Goes Rolling Along, which is the last part of the medley. And this part is great right here. And that was the final take of this whole thing. Like, but that's not going to be the one that they use. This was just kind of like to get the roughest draft for the mixer to know how it all goes together, or at least like a rough idea from each section. But beyond that, there's loads of littler clips that will probably be used to make this thing. My favorite one, honestly, is just this one because it's that part of the Anchors Away song that was done incredibly well, which is this little segment I gave y'all as a demo. Right here. Like, it's just so good. It's incredibly good, insanely good, long-lastingly good, and I was just blown away with it. I think it was incredible. I got to give a huge shout out to everyone who was involved in that, that has been involved so far. Got to give a huge shout out to Budapest Scoring, which is the actual orchestra who y'all are hearing right now, and I also got to give a huge shout out to Marcos. I think his name is Barilari, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, who is an amazing composer, did a great job, very nice person actually. I got to talk to him after it was all over for a little while before I had to try and make a short war summary, and then there wasn't one made today because there wasn't enough news, but it's absolutely incredible stuff. I got to give a huge thanks to everyone who's been involved in that so far, because they have done truly amazing work. And also, I see a lot of y'all are saying it just sounds absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait for it to be done. I showed this to a lot of my friends today, and a lot of them said, some of them didn't even know that this composer has a background working with Disney Pixar, but interestingly enough, this guy actually like apparently exudes Disneyness, because a lot of the people I played this to today, and more so like private showings, I guess, were like, that sounds Disney. And I was like, yeah, I was like, it sounds kind of Disney. And it sounds really good, because a lot of people always think that Disney is one of the most American things there is, you know, like the Walt Disney kind of a company. So I was like, that's actually pretty decent and leans into the American side of things. And this guy was just, the composer, Marcos, was over the moon to do this. He thought it was just amazing, and I have to agree. He did amazing work. Really did it. It's worth in pride, for sure, and patriotism. And so I hope y'all were very happy with that. That's still not the final product. I want to make that very clear. That's not the one y'all are going to be hearing in the intro. The one y'all are going to be hearing in the intro will sound a million times better than that one, which is crazy to think, but that's the way it will be. But nevertheless, wanted to make sure to get that out of the way before we actually got into any more questions, because I saw loads of y'all asking to hear that when I played like the 5-second clip of it, or the 5-second demo. A lot of y'all wanted to hear the rest of it. We're going to be seeing how to do that in the future, because if y'all really like that, there is going to be a way that we can hear more of that. I can just make more of it. Like, I can get in contact with the composer some more and get to work on it and make more. But the problem with that is that it does cost a good bit. So we will have to find a way to make sure that we're not, pretty much going bankrupt in the background trying to make these things. So Matthew and me will have to find a way, if y'all really want to hear more of that, and let us know if y'all do, to be able to support projects like that. Like maybe we could do like quote unquote, not like bonds, but joke that they're war bonds for victory, and people can support like a project fund where we can go and make more music like that. Because I would love to do that. I would love to actually have an entire album of music from the United States, and then make a multicultural album that covers songs from different areas of the world. Not all of them, of course, but some Ukrainian songs, some Israeli songs, some Taiwanese and South Korean songs, and things like that. And then, of course, some spackled in that are the greats, like the British marching songs, some of the French ones, some German ones, actually, and really get like an entire myriad of them. Or we could just make a completely all-American album, which would be a lot smaller in scope. And then make a few standalones from other countries like Ukraine, from Israel, and also from Taiwan, possibly. I would love to do that. I think that would be incredibly cool. And so I hope that many people liked it. And also, let's see. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about it's great. And let's see. Michael Thomas said we need an LSA theme song. We actually have one. It's called The White and Gold. It actually plays in our intro at the beginning, around 5 minutes in. And I've actually already told them, because I know that we're going to be doing more of these in the future. It's just that if people support them and fund them, it will go a lot quicker. I'm still going to probably be doing them nonetheless. But I did tell the composer today that it is 100% on the schedule that we will be making our own version, our own LSA rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, which will sound very similar to the one that's in the intro right now, or at least that'll be the hope. And then we're also going to be having the Lee Spring Army's anthem, The White and Gold, composed by the composer. And so it will no longer be the AI made version that has flaws that we have at the moment. It will actually be redone, very similar, probably almost nearly identical in a lot of ways, different in others to make it better, and then it will turn into an instrumental. So we're going to just be over the moon with this stuff. And I hope that a lot of people are really going to be excited for this stuff, because I've absolutely loved doing it. It's been a fun time. It's been a wonderful thing, really. And we just cannot wait to do more of it if we can. And so with that, Matthew, take it away and get us on into the Super Chats.
All right, so jumping into our final Super Chat segment of the night. Our first one here is going to go to none other than Margaret Hemsley, who's of course a longtime channel legend, in fact, an old guard of the channel, and puts in a $31 donation. And thank you very much, Margaret, for that support. She said, take a live chat question, please, and I'm off to work.
And I it's off to work I go. I got a cease and a desist because I sang the song. But nevertheless, thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying the channel greatly, because we try our best, we try our hardest to be out here each and every single day running this stream. When will it end? I'm just kidding. I do thank you so much, though, for the kind words and enjoying the channel and supporting it and helping it to be possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, Margaret Hemsley. And of course, thank you once again, a massive shout out for you being one of our Australian viewers and enjoying this channel massively, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and a good luck to you on work. I hope you have a great day at work, and I hope that we're here with a short war summary by the time you get off work. Maybe that might be close to the time you're getting off work, or maybe way later in the middle of the night in Australian time. I'm not really sure, but nevertheless, thank you so much once again. And with that, we will grab a live chat question. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this live chat question right here is going to go to AF Kaplan, who said, how can North Korea produce a lot of drones for Russia when so many of their people are starving?
That's a good question. How in the world can they do that when all their people are starving? Well, that's a good question. Matthew, can you reread it?
They don't care about the starving people, man. The North Koreans could care less if people are starving. That is the least concern that Kim could have for pretty much any issue in North Korea, is trying to help his people out. That's the least concern. The biggest concern is how many alliances can he create, and also how much money can he bring into his corrupt regime to support his very lavish lifestyle. So they can come up with the manpower. Obviously, they put the people to work. That's pretty easy. But also they can scrap together some some resources to develop these drones, because that's the priority, not the people. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, in general, the North Koreans are sending folks to war to actually get food so that way Koreans aren't starving, from what we understand at least. But that's why they're doing it. It seems a little backwards, but that's really the only way they can get food, because there's no way to actually grow food in North Korea. So the only way that they can fix the inward situation is to actually operate outwards. That's why they act aggressively towards the West, because whenever they do that, they're hoping to get some form of concessions and food aid, or some other form of aid that would keep people alive in North Korea just a little while longer. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Very good question, by the way. And thank you once again for support, Margaret Hemsley, in sponsoring that live chat and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
In our next super chat here is going to go to none other than Santiago Flores, who's an old guard as well, and puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, for that support. And he said, Hola, Coffee Fund. He said, Zelensky's slip of nuclear weapons was not a slip. It was to prepare the West and shock the Russians. And I was informed that Ukraine got rid of its nuclear weapons, but not its support structure for them.
And I thank you for the support, Santiago Flores. And also, that is interesting to hear. I haven't been able to hear anything about them either keeping or getting rid of their support structure. From what I know, I don't think they have any. They probably wouldn't have been able to afford to keep it, so it probably is in very derelict condition at this point. But I would have to say maybe that is the case, maybe so. But at the same time, if they think the West is abandoning them, why would they need to prepare the West for what is to come? Because there wouldn't be anyone that needs to be prepared or told. And it really is getting rid of the element of surprise that they would have on the Russians if they had a usable nuclear weapon off the bat. I don't really know why they did that. It was a very weird thing. And I've actually, of course, we've seen people in the comments on the last stream saying that, oh, this is untrue. The Ukrainians never said this, although we have multiple sources that day that we showed on stream saying that he did. And so a lot of people are denying that that was even said, although it was said. And so, now it's a battle of, did he really say it when the Minister of someone in the Ministry of Defense said it, or did he not? And we are, of course, leaning towards this as an official government statement, so he did. But I don't really know why anyone would make a claim like that, because you usually don't want to tell people you have a nuclear weapon until you've tested your first one, and then it's obvious. Like, the North Koreans never told anyone that they were developing a nuclear weapon. They just tested one, and it was a shock to the world. The Israelis never, told anyone they had a nuclear weapon. They conducted a test of theirs, found out it was working, and then left it alone. And that's pretty much what everyone has done. So for the Ukrainians to sit there and say, we're going to make one, they'd still have to test it, and then people would know. And I don't know why in the world they would say that before they tested one if they're going to make them. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, Santiago Flores. But it is an interesting point to make, though. Maybe that was their intention. But if so, me personally, I wouldn't know why that would be their intention for those reasons. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Glock, who's there? LSA, who puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Glock for that support, and we appreciate it as always. They said for the Corgi Food Fund. And I'm telling you what, they will appreciate that a lot. For some reason, the baby Sheba is over here flopping and a turning and a squirming for some reason. It keeps distracting me every 2 seconds over here. I'm like, what's going on over there? There's a lot of scraping going on in that cage over there, but I think she's all right. Maybe a little restless tonight, but she did a lot of running today, so she could be maybe sore or something like that. But they will be happy for the food, because no matter what their situation is, if they're sick, if they're tired, or if they're sore, they will take food at any point. But thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And man, little Sheba, poor little baby, she is restless. Well, little baby is restless, but she's a sweet little baby today. I petted her a great deal, and she seemed to like it a good deal. And we also fed her a lot of good food today, and that also seemed to be something that she liked a good deal. But I do thank you so much for the support and supporting the little corgis snack, treat, and food fund. We love to know that people do enjoy the baby corgis, although no one really gets to see them a lot on stream. Glock, who's there, but the corgis will be happy, because no matter what, rain, sleet, snow, or shine, in sickness and in health, they love food. They are fiends for the food. They eat the food. They cherish the food. That's all they live for, is the food. And especially Sheba, she actually does live for the food. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again, Glock, who's there, for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, and also having an LSA flag profile picture. That is incredibly cool, and I appreciate that greatly. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 donation. And it's good to see you once again, Marion. And also, I hope you're doing better as well, as I did hear things weren't going too great before. So I hope things are going better now. And thank you very much for that $20 support. And Marion says, Slava Ukraine and Hiram Slava.
And Slava Ukraini. And thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer, and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that you're doing better, and I hope that you're on the mend, Marion Deemer, on the up and up. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And also, I hope that we've been able to help you make your life a little bit more possible by giving away to, while the hours away, listening to hopefully some good news and hopefully some interesting jokes, or at least the news being put in a more interesting way instead of someone just saying it in a more monotone voice, which a lot of people do, and then they want to call themselves journalists, and then they just kind of like are turncoats, and they just cover whatever they want to cover, and it really has no purpose, looking directly at the hot dog man. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, really quickly, it's time for a census, Matthew. It's time for a census. We have to go check. You know what we have to check, Matthew. We have to check it. We have to do it, and
Oh man, let's see the numbers. Could we please? Oh man.
he hasn't lost another 100 yet, but he's about to. Oh man. And
Oh man. You know something else that's funny? For some reason, people are leaving Twitter in droves, and our follower counts are going low. And like seriously speaking, though, like our followers on Twitter have been dropping over the last 2 days. I'm like, what's up with this? I'm like, we're losing like 10 followers a day for some reason. And I found out that apparently there's a mass exodus from Twitter for whatever reason. I don't understand that either, because I'm like, for the people that are leaving Twitter for whatever the reasons are, you're just leaving it open for the same thing you're saying that you're running from. It's like, don't just abandon it. That's the problem. It's like, stay there and hold your ground. And don't just leave Twitter because you say you don't like the way it's being run. Hold your ground, because once you leave there, the people that were there already are going to stay anyway, except for the people that are, running off to a new platform. It's like, just keep your account there.
dude, like, Twitter at this point is the Wild West, no joke. Like, anything goes on Twitter, like, no matter what direction. But then people will sit there and go, "Aw, man, I'm going to Blue Sky," or they'll go, "I'm going to Damn Truth Social," and it's like neither one's the answer, because you're literally just going into separate echo chambers. It's like, so basically what we're hearing from these people is that they will not listen to anything that disagrees with their worldview, so they have to go into echo chambers, and that's that. Like, that's what I'm hearing, honestly, because I also know, like, I want to make this very clear. Both sides do the same thing. I got to make sure to make this non-political, and it's true. Y'all will see why. Because back when Twitter was not owned by a certain person, which it's owned by now, Elon, there was a group of people going, "Damn it, this damn platform is suppressing my speech. I'm going to go to Damn Truth Social." And then after it was bought by Elon, then the other group does the exact same thing. Back when the other group was leaving, the group that was kind of in control of Twitter was going, "Oh, look at them leave. Look at them. They're so stupid. They want to go live in an echo chamber." And then when it was bought by another guy who isn't necessarily of their beliefs, they do the literal exact same thing. Like, both sides are literally identical. No joke. Like I'm trying to make it more clear with what I'm trying to convey here. They're literally the same. Like, I don't get it. Like, we are on Twitter. We're not going to be leaving, because if we left, we're picking a side. Like, at least on Twitter, at least right now with how it's run, it's quite truly the Wild West. So we can literally just be down the middle without having to pick a political side at all. And it's perfectly acceptable because, like, the Twitter can lean one way, YouTube can lean another. We can go right down the middle, and they're fine with that. But if we go to Truth Social, we're saying that we lean a certain direction. If we go to Blue Sky, we're saying we lean in the other direction. And also on top of that, you get into an echo chamber, and it's like, what is the point of that? Like, of course, we have our own talking points, but I'm not going to put it into an echo chamber. That makes no sense. But it's not like...
And also Twitter is still like the best way, in my opinion, because I use several different sources to gather our news for the videos that we do. And Twitter is still by far the best open source place for open source intel to gather things, because so many different people run accounts there. Like, for example, Ukrainian sources run accounts there in addition to their Telegram pages. And it's a real quick and easy way to see the news. I'm not really seeing much news coming out on Blue Sky. I checked it out today, and it looks like Blue Sky is going to be like maybe a competitor to Twitter one day, but it's not quite there yet. And honestly, it looks very similar to Twitter. Like, I'm not really sure if they went for that or not, but it looks pretty close to it. It looks like the only difference is they're decentralized, so you can host your own server for it if you wanted to. But, I have no interest in doing that. And also, like the Enforcer said, we're not leaving Twitter. I've put a hell of a lot of work into building that Twitter page over there, and we are not going to just suddenly close up shop and leave anyway. So we'll definitely be staying.
Yeah, and also, if we leave Twitter, we pick a side, like, because there's no such thing anymore as a social media platform that emerges as a neutral platform just for the purpose of being a forum. And of course they all have leanings. Like, everyone knows that YouTube has a certain kind of a leaning. We see that whenever they take certain actions against certain kinds of content that we put out, there's a quite clear leaning there. But beyond that, though, YouTube is generally neutral enough, while they may lean in a direction that we can be on here, and it's not like, oh, they're a party group A or B just because they're on a platform. If you go to Truth Social or Blue Sky, you are literally going into one political group or the other. Truth Social is right-leaning, Blue Sky looks to be left-leaning right now. So if I go, we're leaving Twitter and we're going to Blue Sky or Truth Social, everyone's going to go, yeah, they're right-leaning or left-leaning. And so we're not moving, because I'm not going to sit there and let a choice of social media account start to make people think that the channel politically leans one way or another, because we're never going to do that. And so that also, someone said, using Twitter is picking a side. We were on Twitter before it was owned by the other guy. We were on it when it was leaning the other way, and we're on it when it's leaning the other way as well. So generally, we're just there. And also, they don't sit there and say, we're banning people with certain political belief A, or you're going to be ostracized if you have a different political belief. They just literally let anything on there. Like, Twitter is just a platform. Like the main guy is a political guy who owns it, yes. But as far as the platform goes, I have not seen anyone banned for their political takes unless they're doxing someone or threatening someone in the meantime. That's the only time I've seen anyone banned so far, and those situations are justified. Like, they're always justified. But with that, I hope that addresses that well, because we've been on Twitter long before that even happened. So like, that's like saying, oh, you live in America under the incoming president-elect, therefore you're a Nazi. It's like that doesn't make any sense. Like, one, like, that's extreme. The past president, current president right now, isn't a communist, and the incoming one isn't a Nazi. Second off, it's like, we live in America. We've lived here for 20-something years, and just because there's some guy who's in charge of the country doesn't mean that you agree or disagree with everything that the guy does. You just happen to be in the same place. It's kind of the same thing, if you see what I'm saying. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Ambi Pambi, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Ambi Pambi, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And it's good to see you once again. They said, youth in Asia are dying in droves.
Youth in Asia are dying in droves of what in particular? Because I haven't heard of that. I've heard of some things happening in Myanmar, or as it was called, Burma, back in my day. Heavens! Or I've heard of some North Koreans getting put in a meat grinder, but I'm not really hearing of just Asians dying in droves anywhere. In fact, I really haven't heard that at all. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And if you can give me some more details, I would be interested to look into that. But at the moment, I don't know anything about it and haven't heard anything about it to know that that would be happening or not, or talk more on it. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are about to be moving on to the next one. Before we do, James Green, I just got to say this really quickly. Like, I see what you're saying there, but the thing with that, though, is that with Hot Dog Man moving onto that platform, to me, it's quite clear, like, that platform has a political leaning to it. Otherwise, why would they be moving there? It wouldn't make a lot of sense. Like, and I know you may not know who the Hot Dog Man is, and we make sure to remain a high level of anonymity with that person, because they're a pretty sick, vile person. But nevertheless, they are a very politicized person, to the point that I'd say they drank the political Kool-Aid. And so, on that note, if he's going there, I know it's got to be a political platform, because that would be like another guy who talks like this going to Truth Social, which clearly shows that it has a certain political leaning to it. But with that, I hope
You
that.
remember Parler, by the way? You remember that platform
Oh,
called Parler?
yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Blue Sky is probably going to go by the way of Parler. Like, that's just my prediction. And for some reason, I don't know what it is. For some reason, just from the limited amount of time I've looked at Blue Sky, something about it rubs me the wrong way. I'm not sure really what it is. I think it looks too similar to Twitter, is what sort of got me a little bit iffy about it. I felt the same way about Threads when that came out as well. Like the Facebook version of Twitter, they're all like replicas of the real deal, and I don't really like that. It's like, if you're going to come up with something, make it a little bit more original than that. It's just basically like their own version of Twitter, like with a few tweaks to it. And I'm like, I'd rather just be on the original, like the OG platform, which is Twitter, which has the most amount of users on it. And I'll put up with the occasional, inappropriate comment or two that I see on there, and sort of just block those individuals and still get all the news and the intel from Twitter, because it's certainly the number one platform for that. If you're trying to source news like that, it's definitely still going to be Twitter.
I would agree. And also, it's generally one of the main forums on the internet. So, there's no point in leaving, really for that reason. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Kid Rock 966. He puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Kid Rock, for that support. And it's good to see you once again as well in the live chat. And he said, "Thanks, guys, and keep up the good work." And LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for enjoying the good work, and thank you for appreciating it massively and helping us to keep this thing running, Kid Rock. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling. And of course, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die. And thank you once again for enjoying the great work massively. Also, let's see. Matthew, I just saw Ambi Pambi's super chat, and I also saw a lot of people commenting on it, so I had to reread it. I think it's a pun. But don't say the actual word that it's a pun of, because I think that word's like a big no-no on YouTube. But interesting, and I thank you for the support, Ambi Pambi, and putting that in. That's an interesting way of putting that. But still, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to BC Skyman, who's a channel legend, and he's returned from his trip to North Carolina, and he's back once again and puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, BC, for that support as always. And sadly, no comment to address.
Aww.
But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I do thank you for the massive support, BC Skyman, and throwing in that support and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but your support is crucial to keeping this channel possible and helping it to keep on rolling. And we are massively thankful and appreciative of your support, because you've always helped this channel to keep on rolling and will continue to help us to keep this thing going well on into the future. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, Tom Exman said, "How do you trust that's accurate news, Matt?" I assume he's talking about Twitter. I simply use Twitter as a way to find signals for news. I don't take every single story on Twitter as fact, because, of course, there's a ton of fake news running around on Twitter. But, of course, that is a risk to Twitter, because everybody gets to post their own stuff. So you have to fact check everything on there. And that's fine, because it does give me basically the right direction to look. Because, of course, Ukrainian sources are on there. Even the Russian sources are on there as well. So you get to look between the two, and then you get to investigate the stories further, and that's ultimately the news we end up showing on our videos and also on the stream as well, after we fact check it with a couple of other sources to cross-check the information. So that's how we verify it, and we don't just take it for fact like on its face. That would be really dumb to do. If you look at Twitter, by the way, make sure you always double check it, because there's a ton of fake crap going around on Twitter. In fact, I'll just put this out there, to be honest. I've also seen the Ukrainian sources also posting some fake news from time to time, and we've actually run into that on the stream one time before. One particular individual that works for a pretty large newspaper in Ukraine posted something that turned out not to be true, and then he never retracted the statement, which is kind of interesting. But you always got to double check it. But anyways, moving on from that, we are moving on to our next super chat, which goes to Steve T, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Steve T, for that generous support. He said, "With large companies collapsing, inflation, and the cost of the war, do you think the Russian people would ever try to turn against Putin and have a civil uprising? And how would the West, NATO, China, and Europe help that post-uprising?"
I have a feeling if the Russian Federation collapsed into a state of anarchy or civil war like that, we probably would see that the United Nations would come together, probably in unison. and one of the few times that they would, to conduct peacekeeping operations or direct military intervention into the conflict as a united front, because generally everyone would be scared. Not about the Chinese wouldn't be scared at that point about losing a part of a sphere of influence. That would come later. What everyone would be scared about at that point is questionable actors getting a hold of nuclear weapons in the midst of the chaos. So everyone would largely get involved to try and stabilize the situation and then create a Russian interim government that would be heavily influenced by the United States and China, kind of in a bit of a power play to see who will get Russia to lean their direction. The Chinese would probably win that. Just culturally, the Russians lean more towards an authoritarian government, which the Chinese would probably support. So it would get a lot of public backing compared to our form of government, which is a self-determining government, which the Russians really aren't a big fan of historically, like it's the citizenry. And so that's probably what it would look like. I don't think it would be some sort of like a Mad Max world where Russia is just in the state of chaos for years and there's just this ongoing civil war, because everyone in the world is going to treat it a lot more seriously, because there will be nuclear weapons just floating around in Russia that could fall into someone else's hands. And that would be a very dangerous thing if that was the case and one of those people was very unstable, or they just started to fling nuclear weapons at other groups in the area. So that's what I would generally believe that would happen. That's never really happened before in a major country where it's just descended into anarchy or some form of civil war that's nuclear armed. I don't think we've actually seen that ever. I'm trying to think, and we have not, because I was thinking about that. There has been no civil war in France, the UK, the United States, Russia or the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Israel, Pakistan, India, or South Africa during the periods that they have or have had nuclear weapons. And so for that reason, I would highly doubt that that would last long without any kind of direct foreign intervention, pretty much stopping it from going absolutely haywire. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I also got to say, that was a very interesting question right there, Steve T, because I believe that that's probably what I would say, analysis-wise, would probably happen. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And also, let's see, would you ever try to turn against Putin? Okay, so yeah, I mean, I was just wanting to make sure I answered that correctly by rereading it again. So with that, thank you so much once again for support, Steve T, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one also goes to Steve T, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Steve, as well. He said, money to go towards the enforcer for singing lessons and singing part of the intros, and otherwise, just for the news, and take a question from the chat.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support, Steve T. And singing is not probably ever going to be my strong suit. I don't really think I have the tubes, I guess you could call them, for singing. Unlike Jay Schlatt, who put out a Christmas album and it was actually pretty good. Like, no joke, it was actually really good. I don't really have those kinds of tubes, so it would be really hard for me to do that. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you and Matthew could sing. Some of y'all have heard me sing so far right now, and y'all are like, that's terrible, don't do it again. And that's what I generally am in the camp of, is that it's terrible, don't do it again. And I do it as a joke. But yeah, maybe we could do that. Maybe. I don't know. But singing is something that I don't think I've ever seen my career path heading in. Like, if I start singing, that's going to be weird. Like, that's going to be real weird, because no one's ever viewed me as a singing man, Kathleen. They've always viewed me as a talking man. And I always talk. I've always talked a great deal. I talk in this very monotone voice in real life. I actually ham it up a little bit for the streams, because I talk at a much higher tone than I normally do, and that's so that way I have vocal range. Because when I talk normally, it's actually very monotone, and it's very flat and a lot deeper than it sounds right now. So I actually bump my voice up a whole octave, so that way I can reach notes that are higher and notes that are lower when I need to be able to put emphasis on things when I'm talking. So maybe we could do that, maybe, but my natural voice as it is probably wouldn't really be conducive for that. But that's still an interesting idea. But you know what that will be guaranteed to be put forward towards is the LSA Music Fund. Whether it goes towards me getting some singing skills and becoming a singing man, Kathleen, or if it goes to
He's
more
a little
orchestra.
boy, and Kathleen, he's just a singing man. That's all. He's just a singing man. You know, he's a little thing.
He's a devil for the drink, Kathleen. But beyond that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to PVC Swede, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, PVC Swede, for that support. He said, appendicitis, having surgery, loopy AF, LSA, and USA. And goodness, I hope it's going well, by the way. That's sound like an interesting, actually a pretty intrusive surgery, but I hope it's going well.
And I hope that is going well, PVC Swede, because that doesn't really sound like the greatest thing to have appendicitis. We knew someone who had that, and then they got diagnosed with a rare condition that they didn't have, and then they kept saying that they had the rare condition. That was back in high school, and we were always like, "What is up with this dude? What is up with this dude? Not this good." But yeah, that was weird. But beyond that, I got to say, wishing you the best of luck there with that. The appendicitis, from what I understand, is a bit of a severe thing that requires emergency treatment. But still, long live the Lee Spring Army and long live the Republic. And I gotta thank you so much once again for support, BBC Swede. Thank you so much once again. And also, really quickly, some folks may notice that, and I wonder if y'all noticed that. I don't really call the United States or the country. I call it the Republic, and that's because a lot of people say that America is a federal republic. It's not a democracy, it's a federal republic, which is kind of absurd because a federal republic is a form of a democracy, kind of like how Leninism is a form of communism. But nevertheless, I call it the Republic because I think it's cool, and it also makes it sound really neat, in my opinion. It's literally just wordage in the fact I think it's cool. I think it's cooler than saying the U.S. or the nation or the country. The country is used way too much, and also I cannot stand when people say the American people, because it's so overused. You know what I mean? Like everyone on earth says the American people deserve an answer, and it sounds so generic and uncool to me. Like, I feel like if you're going to say something like that, it should be the citizens of this republic have a right to know this information. I think that sounds a lot better, at least in my opinion, just as like a wordage kind of a thing. So I've been leaning more into calling the United States the republic, instead of calling it the country or something like that. But if y'all like that, let me know, because I generally like the word the Republic. I think it sounds really cool. And also in the Pledge of Allegiance, they say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, which was added in the 1960s. But before that, it was just one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. But nowadays, it's one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Well, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with how I've been speaking that, and I wonder what y'all think about that, because I kind of think it's cool. And also, I saw D. Lee say, let's see, Battle Hymn of the Republic sounds cool, 10. It does sound cool, and also the lyrics of that one are incredibly cool. Like, I think the Battle Hymn of the Republic is... Like, if the Star Spangled Banner hadn't won out to be the official national anthem, I'd say that was a runner-up right there, because the Battle Hymn of the Republic, when played properly, is great. I don't like it when it's played too solemnly, like it's supposed to build up really kind of quickly, actually, compared to how most people do it, and then be really proud-sounding throughout most of it. And some people have orchestrated it that way in the past, like the Eric Rogers Orchestra did it very well like that, but most don't, and I don't like some of those compositions for those reasons. But the other ones are great, and I think it's a great one. And so, let's see, I see here, I would do, let's see, I actually see a lot of people liking the idea of calling the United States the Republic instead of the country or the nation or something like that. And I personally think it's better. What do you think, Matthew? What's your take on that?
I think it's better, personally, the one you said.
You do?
I do.
Oh, that's great. That's great, because I think it sounds, and also another thing, it sounds a lot more, refined. You know, it sounds like we're actually a part of something when you say the republic. When you say the country or the nation, every country is a country and every nation's a nation, but not every nation is a republic. And that's what makes it sound incredibly cool to me. And so I hope that does address that the best I can, you know. And also, someone said, also, this land is your land. Now, that's actually a really interesting song. Did y'all know that that was actually banned when it was first written from being aired on the radio?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting thing. Most of it, that's kind of a caveat though. Most of it was banned because when the song is "This land is your land, land is my land, from California to the Gulf Stream waters." You know, this land was made for me, you and me, and all that stuff. That was the only part that would be allowed to play. The rest of it was actually a criticism of the United States, and it was written during the Great Depression. And it was written by a guy who was really uh kind of pissed off with the situation in the country at the time due to the Great Depression. So most of the song was actually just taking a piss on the United States. But the first part sounded good. I think it was the Radio Broadcasting Administration, something like that, the Bureau, it was something like that, because the government had oversight of the radios at the time, said the first stanza is acceptable, every other one is banned from being played on the radio. So that was the only part that was played. So a lot of people think of it as a really patriotic song, but when you take it in its whole, it's actually a generally anti-American song. It's more so along the lines of disliking America more so than liking it, and just talking about how America sucks from end to end. That's kind of how the song really was written. So with that, I hope that gives you a little bit more clarity behind that song. I don't think that would be a good song for the national anthem for that reason, like the actual context behind it. But I still think there was a good amount of other ones. Like, also, a lot of people may not also know this as well, is that the president of the United States has an anthem. It's Hail to the Chief. The vice president of the United States also has an anthem as well, far less played, but it's called, let's see, I believe it's called Hail Columbia. And it's a really interesting song. It was actually the unofficial anthem of the United States for most of its history. It was actually the one that was played, and it's a very interesting tune. It's very different than the Star Spangled Banner, and it talks about how Columbia, which is the United States because it was called that in olden days, is a happy land. You know, everyone fought and bled for freedom's cause, for peace and safety, and all that kind of stuff. It was a very interesting kind of a song with its lyrics. And in the Civil War, this is what's really interesting. In the Civil War during the 1860s, whenever a song would be played to represent the anthem of the United States, considering that there wasn't an official one at that point, the Hail Columbia song was actually played from accounts way more than the Star Spangled Banner ever was. The Star Spangled Banner only rose to popularity at the beginning of the 1900s. So with that, I hope that's an interesting kind of like musical history of the United States a little bit with the symbolism of music and stuff like that. But there's also a really good song. There's so many American patriotic songs that have just been forgotten, generally because I don't know why, but a lot of people just act like that stuff's only geared towards kids and adults can't be patriotic to the country and like good music. That's not, and I'm proud to be an American, because that's like the only patriotic song that's played nowadays. And it's like, it's good, but I feel like it's being way overdone at this point. Like, it's like this has been played like Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. It's getting old. Like, let's get some of the classics out, like Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Let's see, Over There. Like, there's so many good ones. There were so many good ones throughout all of America's history, and most of them were just forgotten. Like, no one knows them. Now, if we do get funding for an LSA album, I'm going to be bringing those things back. Like, those are going to be a part of this like album that we have for the LSA. So I think that'd be pretty cool. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so real quick, I put up a question here. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do special for the Day 1000 stream, so I'm brainstorming here. I said, should we hire Hot Dog Man to perform a clown show on the Day 1000 stream? Just an idea, just for the audience to banter around a little bit. And it looks like about 59% have banted yes. They said we should have him perform a clown show, and we'll supply the fly costume for him to wear. And 41% said no, we don't want him to even perform a clown show because we don't want to see him on this channel. And honestly, I'll have to say this. At first, I was like, the clown show might be a good idea, and we'd pay Hot Dog Man exactly $1 to do the clown show, just to say he got paid something. He put that on his resume. We can help him out a little bit. But I would say, honestly, I'm with the 40%. I don't want to see Hot Dog Man on doing the clown show. He does it every day for free on his channel, so why would we pay him? But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd actually be honest with you, Matthew. I was actually going to tell you after the stream, I want you to write an email to him and ask him if he'd be willing to do that on the Day 1000 show. Short notice, but he finally get on the show, which is what he's wanted the entire time.
What's the going rate for that type of thing?
He'd have to pay us about $50, but he would still get some exposure, and that would pay for itself, right? Like that would be good for him. So tell
I
him.
think you already put a down deposit of $100 back in the day. I think about a year ago.
Well, he still owes royalties, and then that's about $50 or so. So just write him an email after the stream and say, "Hey, we're looking to have you here for a clown show. No reason to bring makeup. You already look like a clown as it is. Just get on air and look like an idiot for maybe 30 minutes, and that'll be our celebration for day 1,000." I was thinking that would be kind of our proposition. I feel like it's a very kind one. It's very generous, considering that we do understand that he's down on his luck. He's losing subs. He's hardly paying the rent. If he pays us an additional $50, I don't know, maybe the exposure he gets from this channel would help him to be able to find some more limited income, at least for a short while, or maybe he would continue to bleed viewers and subs. Who knows? But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. I hope that also gets us a free hit piece courtesy of the Hot Dog Man. Usually that kind of stuff does. But please do send him an email, Matthew, after the stream, or maybe even right now, and we'll see what he's considering of that. Also, Matthew, we're like joking about this entirely, and we're not going to send an email. Like, I'm going to let you all know that up front. But watch Hot Dog Man, Matthew. He's going to make a video and say, "And they're such lying grifters. Look, they said they were going to email me on stream, and they didn't. Exposed." And it's like, it was a joke. Like, it's like, do you think we'd email him? No.
Oh
Hell no.
man, it was an offer that I couldn't refuse. I couldn't turn it down.
Aw, man. I have to be able to pay them $50 to get on their show. Aw, man. Aw, man. They're grifters because they do this for a living. By the way, guys, all of my viewers, I need you to pay me money for another vacation to Ukraine. Aw, man. That's not grifting. Like, aw, man. It's like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? But he'll make another hit piece. It'll have another bold title, "The Enforcer Exposed," and it will literally just be clips from our stream. It's like nothing like unbelievable or new. It's just us trashing on Hot Dog Man, and it's like, yeah, it's like that's what happens. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Snowy, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Snowy, for that support.
Hey!
Whoa!
Oh.
What was that?
Whoa.
There was something sneezing behind me. I think that was Mr. Wergy.
Wergy.
But Snowy said, "Can the current U.S. government quickly move frozen Russian assets in the U.S. to Europe in order to prevent the next U.S. government to unfreeze them?"
And I'd say, let's see. They possibly could, but that would require an act of Congress, and I don't think that's going to be happening right now. I don't even think Congress is in session at the moment, if I'm correct. I think they're on a recess. I'm not sure on that, though. I might be wrong. But I don't think that could happen before the new presidency takes over. I also think that that's a little bit jumping the gun. I think a lot of people are really jumping the gun because, I'll be honest, the Secretary of Defense pick is an interesting one. That's all I can say about it. But from what we can tell, the guy is pro-Ukrainian, and then the Secretary of State, he's generally leaning towards being pro-Ukrainian. He's not like gung-ho, though, but he's leaning more in that direction. So it looks like for now, the incoming administration is going to be pro-Ukrainian, looking to get a peace to the war and into the war, but it still will be pro-Ukrainian in its characteristics. And so for that reason, I think that might be jumping the gun a little bit. And I also don't think they would be able to do it anyways. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I would know. And also, once again, I just want to put this out there. Everyone be calm. Don't freak out or panic, because there's a load of people out there panicking and freaking out about everything. I don't know what it is with elections these days. Folks have got to calm down, on all sides. But right now, there's a certain group freaking out because their side lost, kind of like how about, 4 years ago, the other side did the same thing because their side lost, all that. It's just how it works. But, at least in the modern day, I don't think that's how it should work, but that's how it works. But beyond that, I highly encourage people to remain calm. There's nothing that's going to be happening that's going to be extreme or bad coming out of this. Things are largely going to remain status quo. We still generally believe that. We're not seeing anything that would lead us to believe that it's going to go badly, that things are going to go horrendously. It seems as though a lot of the things that were being said are already being tamped down, it's not going to happen, or it's show, or at least the actions are showing, that there's a difference from the words, in the best way I can say. So don't freak out and don't panic until actual action happens. And that's something I got to say a lot about, is do not watch CNN or Fox, because we were on, I think we were flipping in between them, and Fox is talking about how the purges are coming and they're a great thing, and then CNN is talking like it's Nazi Germany now, and like the press is going to be rounded up and thrown into the sea or something. Like, don't go on to those channels, because it's nothing but, like, it's either hyping up like the fear that they think's coming around the corner, or it's hyping up like just stuff to bring people onto the air. Nothing like that's going to happen. It will not, because I've been hearing this now for 8 years, specifically from both ends, whenever their person would lose or the other one will win, and I haven't seen anyone put into a camp yet. So I'm generally believing that that's cap. Just being entirely honest with y'all. So just make sure to stay calm out there. Stay level-headed. Don't freak out. And also, these people are talking about hypotheticals. Like, that's the other thing. Don't get freaked out about people talking about hypotheticals, because CNN and Fox don't even know what the hell's going on. Like, hell, y'all can't even count on them for reliable news coverage most days of the week, much less what's going to be happening in the future. They can't even tell you what's happening today, hardly. So I would have to say, just stay calm. Nothing extreme or crazy or nuts is going to happen. It's going to be fairly all right, and nothing insane will occur. It'll honestly kind of be status quo, to be entirely honest, in my opinion. And if I'm wrong, I'll say I'm wrong. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here is going to go to Tyler Morton, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Tyler, for that support. He said, thoughts on the U.S. sending our jets into Ukraine as a defensive role just to shoot down missiles, and if Russia collapsed like the Soviets, could we get the rest of their nukes?
We probably would not be able to get the rest of their nukes, because according to how international law works, if Russia fractured, one of those states would end up being the successor state to Russia, just how Russia was the successor state to the Soviet Union. And so for that reason, we would generally believe that one of those states would be selected as the successor state, and they would be able to retain nuclear weapons. However, on the other topic, I do not believe sending American jets into Ukraine to conduct air defense actions is a smart idea. That is direct American military involvement, and that is pretty much undoing everything that we've been trying to ensure for the past 3 years, is that it doesn't turn into a major world war in between the Russians and the West. And by doing something like that, that is truly turning it into a world war, because we are entering on the side of Ukraine as an active belligerent in the conflict, even if it is defensively. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And also, sadly, Miss Disa, we will not be doing a live appearance on day 1000. We simply do not have the space in Enforcer Studio 2.0 to even be able to do that, to be entirely honest. And also, we don't have any of the infrastructure set up with us right now either to be able to do that. So day 1000 will be a somewhat normal-ish looking stream, except for the fact that hopefully we'll have the Armed Forces intro done and ready to go by that day, which will be pretty neat. We'll also make the intro a little bit more special in other ways. But still, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does answer that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Jay Bagwell, the channel legend, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jay, as well, for the support. He says, great stream, guys. And tonight was vintage Enforcer. High spirits and top-notch analysis, and you boys make it look easy. Walk with your boys.
Walk with your boys. We make it look easy.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
He did it, and I gotta thank you so much for the support, Jay Bagwell. And I gotta say, I know it was. I was a lot more optimistic and happy sounding tonight, and energetic. Generally because I've been zooted on coffee all day since like 8 in the morning, so I'm probably over caffeinated at this point. I'm actually sweating a little bit, so I know I'm over caffeinated at this point because it's cold in here and I'm sweating somehow. But beyond that, I'm really optimistic because I got to do something really fun today. Sometimes the streams do get tiring, just doing them day after day, week after week. So sometimes I guess the tiredness is starting to show through, which is something that should not be happening because we want to make sure that we're as happy and positive as we've always been. But if I had to give a reason for why that's happening, that probably would be the best one I can give. But still, we are always happy to do. We love doing it. It's just that sometimes the energy starts running low, and I think my patience lately has started to run a little bit low, and I'm getting a little bit more short with some of the takes that are a little bit bizarre that usually I would deal with tact, but now it's getting a little bit more short. But still, I'm glad to hear that you did enjoy tonight, and it was vintage Enforcer, and hopefully I'll be able to make sure to keep up a good energy level and keep this thing rolling like it always has been. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, J-Bag. Well, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and thank you for being a longtime legend and an absolute champ of the stream. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Uncle Sam's misguided child, excuse me. And Uncle Sam put in a $10 donation and said, "Long may we stayed LSA. Thanks, Enforcers." And what's I think I'm gonna say what's new with any updates on new Russian riots in the ranks or any abandoned posts.
And I thank you for the support, and I thank you for being a big member of the LSA. And let me see if I can find that question specifically to make sure that we answer that correctly. And so let's see here. Let's see.
Would you like me to reread that question?
Yes, I'm trying to find it, and so please reread
It's at
it.
the bottom. But anyways, it says, "Long live the LSA. Thanks, Enforcers. And what's new with any updates on the new Russian riots in the ranks or abandoned posts?"
And I finally found it. I was blind. For some reason, I didn't see it. Thank you so much for the support, Uncle Sam's misguided child. And long may we stay the LSA. And the LSA will never truly die. And what's up with any updates on new Russian riots in the ranks? We haven't heard anything about them. I think they've already been crushed. They happened really quickly, and they ended really quickly, probably, because we are not hearing anything about them today, which would suggest to us that they've probably been put down at this point. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Uncle Sam's misguided child. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5, the usual, and says, "Take a live chat question." And we shall. And thank you very much, CK Bold, for that support as always. And this live chat question goes to AF Kaplan, who says, "Is there anything that can be done to accelerate the economic collapse of Russia?"
And thank you so much for the support. And anything to spurn the economic collapse of Russia, there really isn't a lot more that we can do at the moment because we've pretty much applied all of the practical sanctions that we can, and sometimes those sanctions are still being circumvented. We've done just about everything we can. Watching the Russian economy collapse is something that we can't actively get involved to push any farther at this point. It's something that's going to naturally degrade on its own, and it's really just a waiting game at this point, from what I'm seeing. And so I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. I hope that addresses that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Hugo, who puts in a 5. And thank you, Hugo, as well, for that support. I wonder if his last name is Boss. But he says, "Why is..." let's see here. Hold on, let's see here. Oh, so sadly, Hugo, we can't get into this one. Sadly, I hate that we can't get into it, but this one does get a little political because that individual who used to be apolitical is now highly partisan and highly political. So we can't talk about him because that gets people riled up and it gets some fights going down there, something like a brawlhalla in the live chat. But, you know, yeah, I can't even comment on it, sadly. But Enforcer, what say you?
He just used to be known for building cool rockets. And now he's political. Dude, I just hate modern American politics, man. It's stupid. But beyond
I think we ought to. I think we should.
Wait, man. Let me do it correct, man. Wow, look at all those people. Something like that. Like I don't even know what happened with that, man. I was like, what the hell is this?
I don't even know, man. It's like, I mean, I understand like the fear of public speaking and stuff like that, but at the same time, I'm like, geez, I've never seen nothing like that.
I've never seen anything like this, man. And the hop. Oh no, not the hop, not the hop. You know what I'm talking about, man. You know what I'm talking about. The hop, you know?
Yeah, the HOP, the hop.
Yeah, the hip hop, the hippity hop, and the hippity hop don't stop. But beyond that, modern politics is something that we generally do avoid here. I thank you for the support, though, Hugo. But sadly, we can't talk about that because while that person was not a political person, like literally just a few years ago, they are now. And I mean, they are very political. So it makes it impossible for us to talk about them because it would break the no politics rule. One thing I can't really say that either because that's trying to, yeah, sadly, I can't even comment on that either, unfortunately. But still, I do thank you so much for the support. Can't make much more of a comment on that than that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Trigger, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "Will the war end with Russia's economy collapsing?"
It probably will. That's actually, if the war just keeps going until its natural conclusion, that's probably what will happen. If a peace to the war is negotiated somehow, it will end, but the Russian economy will still probably end up collapsing because it's just beyond gone at this point, with the interest rates being as high as they are and Russian companies ailing so badly that they're collapsing on a near weekly basis at this point. I would assume that they're probably still going to collapse. But if it naturally ends, it probably will be because of an economic collapse. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Keandre Graham, who puts in a 5 and says, I so appreciate the DJ Mustard reference.
And I thank you so much for enjoying the DJ Mustard reference. Busting wait, hang on. Mustard on the beat. Oh, I don't even know what the song is, but I actually cannot stand it. I'm sorry. Like, if you like DJ Mustard, that's on you, but I just don't like the guy. I think music like that is trash. And while we were watching, though, and that's not an attack against your preference of music. If you're
Damn,
like,
like
that's not meant as
DJ Mustard reference, and he attacked the music.
Yeah, I was like, it sucks, man. But like, we were watching the weigh-in for Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, and like the worst music was playing. It actually sounded like rot. Like, I was like, this is rough. And of course, I'm sure that you can see where I'm coming from there, because my tastes are really different. Like, it's like mine's mostly like orchestras, patriotic music, stuff like that. It's very different. Not to say that it's bad music. It's popular for a reason. People have to like it because it's good. But it's just not my thing. So like, when I was saying it, it was kind of like a joke on it, like kind of like a riff on it. But I'm glad to hear that you do like DJ Mustard, because Mustard on the beat, dun, 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 or however it goes. But still, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Sorry for putting that out that way, because that wasn't meant to come out that pointed. I'd be like, man, it sucks. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Keandre Graham. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, by the way, like it's not really my music style per se. You know, I wouldn't mind it, but does anybody really focus on what they're saying in these songs? Like, I'm not sure if anybody really focuses on that, like the lyrics in these. Like, the beats are catchy. Like, I'll admit that. Like, I used to play percussion, so I appreciate a good beat with a good cadence to it. And typically, hip hop beats have really good cadences and they're catchy. But at the same time, though, I'm like, these lyrics are like horrific, like what they're saying in these songs. And I think people just kind of overlook that and listen to the catchy beat, and they're like, "Oh, this is like great." But like actually listen to the words they're saying there. It's like they're advocating for some really bad stuff in that song. Everybody's just like going along. They're like saying stuff about murder and things like that, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, this is great." I'm like, man, I don't know about all that,
man. But you know, another thing, man, is like sometimes the lyrics don't even make sense. It's just to make something that rhymes. Like, it'll be like, Mustard on the beat, ho. Dun, 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 dun. My feet got caught up in the jig, yo. Dun, dun. It's like, wait a minute, are you talking about like a sailing boat? Like, your feet got caught in like the rope jig on the side of a sail? It's like, the hell is that got to do with anything? And then the next lyric would be like, I shot 5 guys in the Bronx. Dun, dun. It's like, what? It's like, dude, what are we talking about? It's like, are you in the Bronx or on a boat or what? Like, I'm like, I don't even know. Like, it's like the song's like unfollowable. Like I don't know. Like, and also the beats, to me, like, the beats kind of get obnoxious because almost all of them follow like the same rhythmic pattern. And like, yeah, like you could say that almost all categories of music kind of get like that. Like, all rock songs are going to kind of sound similar and stuff. But with really, really modern rap, I feel like it's getting to the point it's extreme. Like, I will say this, like, old rap from the 90s and like the early 2000s was actually interesting because it was creative. There was like a variety of instruments. Not all of them sounded the same. They all had different styles. But now with like the mumble rap thing or whatever this is, I don't get it. Like, it just, I don't even know how most of these people, like, how I'm even understanding the lyrics in them, because the lyrics are illegible. And that's kind of like a thing to me. Like, if there is lyrics in the song, I want to know what they are. And you either can't understand them, or they don't make sense, or they're like crazy lyrics.
Well, hell, when the lyrics are legible, it's horrific. It's like, how do people get away with saying like certain like words which are really, really badly off limits in normal society? They get away with saying those words in these songs, and it's like, so all they had to do to get away with saying these really bad, horrific words was to put it in a rap song, and it's like perfectly acceptable. Then I don't understand that.
Yeah, and then there was who was that fella, Matthew, in Atlanta, where they're like, okay, you can't talk to any gang members, all right? Like, who was that?
That was Thy Young Thug.
Yeah, you know, like that guy. It's like I don't generally, like, you know, just being honest about most rappers, I don't generally subscribe to the kind of lifestyle that they live. It's a dangerous, wanton kind of an illegal lifestyle. That's the best way I could explain it. I'm not really a big fan of that kind of stuff. I'm generally a fan of people being upstanding citizens, as that is the imperative of the nation, of the republic, is to have upstanding citizens. It allows for this country to improve itself and to work towards greater things. But with most rappers are living a life in gangs. And like I get that it's kind of like a part of the culture of rap, but at the same time, it's like is that something that is worth promoting into the mainstream? Because I don't know. I mean, like, maybe promoting that kind of stuff into the mainstream is the reason why people don't really consider it to be an imperative anymore to be an upstanding citizen, because there's more of an emphasis on it's better to be not so much of an upstanding role model or a citizen and just do stuff sporadically and irrationally that may not be for the benefit of society. I sound almost philosophical saying stuff like that. I don't know if that sounds goofy or not, probably does, but that's kind of my take on it. That's why I like patriotic songs. Because like they generally support patriotic ideals, or like the betterment of the nation, or everyone working together towards a common cause, a good cause that improves everyone in the nation altogether. That's why I generally like those songs, because I like the message that they give, and it's always an inspiring one that really, in my opinion, at least gets me going to where I want to improve things and work towards something better. But I just don't feel like those songs are working towards that. I feel like they work towards the opposite sometimes. And so that's my honest take on it for the large part. Oh no, Matthew did the famous quote that we reference in this house. I'm not a gangster. I'm a businessman. And my business is crime. It's like, no,
Oh my
it's
God.
like you're a gangster.
And then every single Lad Bible episode with that particular English gangster in it says, after he says, I'm not a gangster, I'm a businessman, and my business was crime. If you call me a gangster, I'll mess you up. And Lad Bible puts in the title, Gangster Tells All the Secrets right now. It's like, jeez, man. BuzzFeed went in hard on that guy, and he keeps coming back anyway.
Dude, and he'll just sit there. Every time he starts off, though, dude, he'll always say, I'm not a gangster, I'm a businessman, and my business is crime. It's like,
Man,
that
he's either
sounds,
super low IQ or he's super high IQ, and I simply don't understand it.
man, like, maybe it's like a 140 IQ move, though, man. He's like, I'm not a gangster, I'm a businessman, and my business is crime. It's like, yeah, isn't that what the like folks in the mafia said too? It's like they were in a gang. Like, it's like they were like, we're just running a business here, and it's like, are you? It's like, I don't know, but still,
I think if you're busting kneecaps and you're conducting business, I think that's literally what a gangster is. That's like he's like, oh yeah, I did bust a few kneecaps in my day, but I'm not a gangster. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, the average like businessman and CEO is going around with the bat on the daily, going into the C-suite, talking about, come here, buddy, give me them kneecaps. You didn't do your job right today. It's like, no, that's a gangster. That's not a CEO.
no, Matthew. All right. Well, this is the third time that you clocked in 5 minutes late. Show me the knees. And then it whips out like a baseball bat out of the cabinet. It's like, that ain't no business, man. That's a criminal right there. That's a gangster. And also fighting fence, it sounds like Andrew Tate. Nah, Andrew Tate's the kind of guy. Oh, man, don't even get me started on Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate's the kind of guy to sit there and say the goofiest things like, you shouldn't be sitting there and enjoying your hobbies. You should be working on a grind. It's like, look, man, like, everything that like that's stupid advice for people. Honestly, a lot of advice out there is stupid. And that is certainly some of the dumbest that I've ever heard is from the alpha male category. It's just dumb. Like, I don't even get it. It's so materialist, and you can tell that no one in that sphere is actually happy. Like, if they actually do accumulate this wealth of which they speak, they have nothing to actually make themselves happy. They don't have a family. They don't have kids. They don't have a real purpose for existence. Rather than getting more material items, and I'm sure material items are great and makes people happy and stuff, but it's like that isn't the entire pursuit of life. And also to pursue vapid, short-term benefits. It's like that's not an alpha thing. That's being highly emotional. And I'm not saying I'm an alpha, but I'm saying that if anything is an alpha, it sure as hell isn't that. Being wildly emotional, very sporadic, just doing things in the short term for a short term bit of pleasure. It's like none of that seems alpha to me. That just seems like being a schmuck. Like, you know,
Hell,
like
if
that.
you think the alpha male category is bad, you ought to check out the finance bro category. Like, it's even
Oh,
worse. Like that Grant Cardone guy running around on YouTube like 24/7 talking about you're not a real man unless you got a Rolly. It's like, oh my God, it's like, what is this cringe crap you keep putting out? And he literally says like he's full of crap. Like occasionally he'll say, "Don't listen to what I'm saying. Look at my actions. That's what speaks louder than words." And it's like, golly, it's like, dude, it's like, why do you have to resort to this junk? It's like, and also they're flashing the big Mercedes, the watch, the car. It's like, why are you flashing all this stuff in front of my face and stuff like that? If you know how everything works so well and everything, and you have the secrets to success and wealth, why are you flashing this in my face and on YouTube? It's like there's always something else they're trying to sell you.
and also another thing I just could not stand is when they're like, you want to be like, who's that guy? Oh man, I'm trying to think of the guy. I don't know if you've seen him, Matthew, but it's some guy named Wes or something like that. But oh my God, it's
Gary
crazy.
V.
Wait a minute, what?
Are you talking about Gary V?
No. It's some guy called Wes something. It's like Wes Whistler or something like that. But anyways, this guy sits there and he rents a house, dude, for like 95 grand a month. So he's just like blowing money. But he'll sit there and be like, you need to know how to be an alpha. And that's why you need to sign up for 3 grand a month for my alpha course. And it's like he wasn't rich until people started giving him money for the courses. And then he became rich. It's like the way that the alpha males, quote unquote, get rich is off of suckers believing that they got the answer and they're paying them to get it. It's like they get rich off of suckers like you if you're one of those people. It's like there's no hard work that went into what they're doing. And then they spew bullshit because they don't know anything to these people to keep them on the hook and keep them paying 3 grand a month, so that way they can keep living the lifestyle they're living. It's like, that is just goofy. Like, I don't know how people believe that kind of stuff, because it's like, if you really want to know how to make money, it's literally as easy as this. You just work hard and you do something you like, and if you really like what you're doing and you work really hard, it actually is true, you will generally succeed. Some people will not. That happens, and it's very unfortunate. But generally, if you work very hard, have great convictions to what you're doing, and you just keep at it, you will succeed. There's many living testaments to that. I think Matthew and me are a living testament of that with this channel. We worked very hard, and we've worked nonstop on this thing. We still are, and the channel has succeeded. And we are actually making a comfortable living doing this as our job, and we're happy with that. You know, as far as everything goes with this is great. Like, this is what I wanted to do in life. If I ever, sit there and think about it, it's like, this is where I want to be. I'm happy with it. I work hard. A lot of y'all say that shows, and therefore we succeeded. It's as simple as that. You don't have to get into this goofy stuff about drop shipping or anything like that, or, having to get a Bugatti or a Rolly. All that stuff is stupid. It means nothing if you're not happy with your life and you're not happy with what you're doing. Life advice in the middle of the night. But, Matthew, what were you about to say?
I wasn't about to say nothing. I was just listening.
Oh, man, you're taking advice from me. We need to clip that and make a TikTok out of it, Matthew. And be like, look, you don't need to be happy with your life. You just need to get on a grind, like, or something like that, and just do like what everyone else.
YouTube courses on the side too, like how to moderate a live chat like a champ from a 10 times Emmy winner. I'd come up with some courses or something like that and just sell them and be like, if you sign up for this course, not only will you be an alpha Chad male, you'll also be a top tier moderator, and also you'll know about war inside and out. It's like, oh, come on. It's like, if you just like study it long enough yourself, you don't need to buy a course. You can just figure it out on your own. And it's like, that's what the guys won't tell you. It's like, if you have it so figured out and everything like that, then why sell a course? I don't understand.
Also, Matthew, one more thing, man. We need to make a TikTok where it's like this, like where we're really like the crypto bros or the alpha males, man. We need to do one like this. Stop being homeless. Just buy 5 houses and lease them out as Airbnbs. Be a man. Like, be a Chad. When you see someone in help, beat them down. Like, something like that. Just sit there and say crap like that and put it on a TikTok. It probably would blow up because that's how it works in that goofy kind of a world.
What color is your Bugatti?
Dude, that literally sounded like you were talking through a styrofoam cup. No joke, man. It was like, what color is your Bugatti? I was like, what the world? But anyways, with that, I hope we beat this topic into the ground, because I don't know how many super chats we have left in live chats, but we are starting to run out of time. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plazath, who puts in a 5 and says, I'm happy to support the LSA music journey.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for supporting the LSA Music Journey. We love to know that people liked the beat, musted on the beat, and I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel's efforts in making sick beats. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Hugo. Once again, he puts in a 5. And sadly, Hugo, we can't mention this one either because it once again mentions that highly partisan guy. But thank you very much for the support once again.
Oh, that
And the next
carp.
one, that carp. The next one goes to Jack Ray, who puts in a 5 as well and says, "Battle him of the Republic." Nice.
Nice. And I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I'm glad to hear that you agree with me. I like the Battle Hymn of the Republic. I think it's good. And so, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Hugo yet again, and we can read this one off, and he puts in a 5 once
Hey!
again. He said, "The Republic also sounds responsible, a collective commitment. LSA is a republic, never a banana."
Never a banana, always Republic. And I got to thank you for support, Hugo. And I'm glad that you agree with me. I think Republic just sounds like if a word could be described as drippy, I think Republic just sounds drippy. I also think citizens of the republics is a great way to address the people of the nation. It sounds much more elegant. And it sounds very deserving of the kind of people who live within this amazing republic of ours. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Octavian Timurasanu, who puts in a 5 and says, "Yankee Doodle is pretty funny, but being used by the British to make fun of the Americans and then being adopted by Americans to be ironic."
It is really actually, Octavia. That's actually a very famous kind of a story about that because it actually was a song that was made by the British to make fun of Americans, and then we just took it and ran with it, kind of like how we ran with the Spring Army thing. We kind of did that as a country originally when it was founded, which is, well, it's incredibly cool when you think about it. But it's not the first one because the Star Spangled Banner is not an original lyric. I guess you could say the lyrics are original, but the actual melody is not. It's actually from a British drinking song called Anachron in Heaven. And it's like this song about just like getting drunk and having another drink. But we took the lyrics of the Star Spangled Banner, which is a poem, and then we imposed it on top of the Anachron drinking song, and we made our national anthem, which is a pretty interesting story in its own right. But there are loads of songs actually that are kind of like that in American history. I'm trying to think of another one. Dixieland. That is one that actually got parodied really well by the North in the Civil War, because many people will know the song Dixie. It's a fairly old song from here in the South. A lot of people consider it to be the anthem actually of the Confederacy in the Civil War, which is actually untrue. It was actually another one called "God Save the South," which is it sounds like a damn high school alma mater. It actually was. It sucked. I think it was terrible. But beyond that, the song Dixie was actually parodied by the Union in the Civil War, which is a really cool story because they came up with lyrics that were pretty funny. And I was like, dang, that's a good one. And it kind of stuck around for a little bit, but both of the songs kind of died off and then just kind of mingled around and then had their final death like maybe 60, 70 years ago or so. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here is going to go to Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, who puts in a 2. And thank you very much, Uncle Sam, once again. He said Republic for the win.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad to hear that people are liking the idea of calling the nation the Republic. It's wonderful to hear that, and I get to thank you so much once again for support, Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, and I hope that addresses that incredibly well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so with that, we are now moving on to our live chat questions. We're fresh out of Super Chats, and once again, huge shout out to everybody once again for supporting the channel, and it is very much appreciated, and of course, and necessary to help keep the channel running, so we appreciate it. And with that, we're moving on to our Morse code decoders of the stream, and tonight, we had the whole roster. It's Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schills, David Millsaps for Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse for tonight reads, "When you're doing so badly that North Korea is supplying you with everything, you're cooked. LLT, LSA, and great job, guys."
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that down on the nail. That was the jackpot, and thank you for saying we were doing a good job. And y'all got that down on the nail again on the 995th day of the war. I'm really impressed with that, and I got to say a good job to each and every single one of y'all. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that did address that well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Susan Cook, who says, "Where have all the thermite drones gone? And I miss those videos."
I've wondered that too. We haven't really seen them at all. I don't know if they just stopped using them. Maybe they did. I don't really know. We're just not seeing a lot of videos of them anymore. I generally would assume that they're still being used. But if we can ever get a clarified answer on that, you know what? I'll see. I don't know if we'll be able to do this soon, but I'm going to reach out to Civdiv and we're going to ask him because I think he's over there right now. And maybe he has an answer for that. Because if he did, I would like to know because we haven't seen them like for maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks now. And I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they're just not filming that anymore. Maybe they don't consider it interesting enough to film. Or maybe they just stopped using them for one reason or another. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second and last question of the night.
And this one goes to Marvelous Matt, who says, where's North Korea even getting the money to produce all these new weapons?
North Korea doesn't need money because they have this crazy thing that I can't even mention on YouTube, but it's the labor of people who are compelled to work not because of money, but because they are forced to. And there's a certain kind of word that revolves around that YouTube doesn't really like that much, so I can't bring it up. But that's generally why they're able to do such a thing without really having any money, because these people aren't working for money. They're working so that way they don't get killed by the government. And so with that, I hope that kind of addresses that the best I can without saying what it is outright. And with that, we are on to, believe it or not, the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who put in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is going to be Eric Wine Nelson, who says, if Prigozhin took over back when he could have, do you think he would have been better or worse than Putler?
I don't really know. I think the war would have actually ended, but as far as Prigozhin running the country, it would have been a warlord running Russia. Not really that much different than it is now. But I feel like things would have been a little bit more oppressive than it is under Putin. Just a little bit, not a lot actually, but I feel like the war would have actually ended. But so I think by the end of it, Prigozhin was actually wildly disillusioned with the war in Ukraine because he had literally been in it and seeing it firsthand for himself. And so with that, I hope that does address that as best as I possibly can, although we would have never known. I mean, Prigozhin wasn't really a nice guy. He was like Russia's version of Heinrich Himmler. You know, there's not really a lot to be said for someone like that. They're pretty irreprehensible, even if they could have overthrown the main guy. But still, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching so far. We have had, interestingly enough, at the peak, there was 9,000 people here, but only 53,000 have watched since the beginning of the stream. Very interesting. But nevertheless, if you have enjoyed and you are new to the channel, and some of y'all actually are, please make sure to subscribe. We've gained about another 300 subscribers today, and we're happy to see everyone joining this channel. But nevertheless, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks, and we'll see you all tomorrow night on the next night of War News streaming at 10 p.m. Eastern, and also midday as well for the short war video if there is enough news to cover. But with that, thank you all once again for watching. We've had 53,000 people tuning in by the end of the stream, which is a very big number, and also 2,800 likes, and we appreciate it very much. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Spring on me shall stand.